I think my heart now beats for three. Obsessed and so obscure. You and me and Christopher Lee. Obsessed and so obscure.
Welcome to part 2 of our breakdown of the amazing Gather Up box set. I'm Jessie, and as ever, I'm joined by Courtney.
Hi.
And Tara.
Hello.
Today we'll be discussing the rarities in unreleased disc as well as live at a festival. Also, the man behind the album covers, photographer Ben Meadows, was gracious enough to answer some questions for us about Gather Up and generally working with Matt throughout the years. For those of you who are not familiar with Ben's work, it can be seen throughout the pages of the book that was included with the Gather Up box set, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. In addition to Ben's work with Matt on portraits and album art, Ben works as a unit set photographer. He has worked on both Toast of London and Toast of Tinseltown, You're the Rabbit, Road to Brexit, Stathlet's Flats, Cheaters, Silo, Trying, and Criminal Record, to name a few. Ben is also responsible for the Kill the Wolf making of video, and if you haven't seen that, we'll link it in the episode description.
Yeah, that's a really telling video. You see Matt performing or practicing some of the Kill the Wolf songs in his flat at that time. You get to see what's on his walls, which is kind of a peek behind the scenes into some of his influences in and of itself. The original Music for Insomniacs art, if you look really closely, there's a framed Jesus Christ Superstar poster, so we'll make sure we link that, but it's good stuff.
All right, so let's get into the Q&A from Ben, and playing the part of the interviewer will be Tara, and playing the part of Ben Meadows will be Courtney.
Ben, apologies in advance.
Yeah.
I doubt I'm going to do a very good impersonation of you. I can't do a British accent for one thing, so.
You could try. Come
No.
on.
No one wants to hear that. It's like you've heard Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. That's going to sound authentic.
No, come on. Dick
what
Van Dyke's Cockney accent in Mary Poppins was super authentic. You cannot tell me otherwise.
It's a jolly holiday, Mary.
Oh gosh, love him.
So we asked Ben, let's start at the beginning. How did you first get started with photography, and who inspired you?
Ben said, I think through a very geeky fascination with cameras and photographic equipment. It was only later on that I became inspired by other photographers, and the way that photography created an invisible passport to access unique situations and witness unique events that you would never see unless you were holding a camera. Ben told us that his first camera was a Kodak Instamatic that belonged to his grandmother, and he begged his parents to buy some film for it. He said, quote, they were amazed that anything came out. I think I was 8. He said he now works with Sony cameras, only in a very boring way, that's his quote, as they were the first cameras that you could use on set and would operate silently. All modern cameras are pretty amazing these days.
So Ben mentioned in the past that he had heard Matt's work on opium and jumped at the opportunity to work with him for the Witch Hazel shoot. So naturally we asked, how did you first connect with Matt?
He said, I first met Matt at a Dark Place DVD signing. I told Matt that I was a big fan of Snuffbox and the music from Snuffbox and Opium. I don't think Matt remembers that. But it was when I asked Matt to come to the studio I was working at to take some pictures. That is when we first properly connected.
What is your favorite album of Matt's?
I think Kill the Wolf is my favorite, but I think Matt's work on The Blue Elephant is excellent and shows the progression in Matt's music.
Totally agree with that.
As do I.
It's been interesting to watch your shoots with Matt evolve along with his music. From the pastoral imagery of Witch Hazel and Kill the Wolf to the more subdued images of The Small Hours and Night Terrors. What does the discussion around the tone and imagery of these photo shoots look like? Does Matt know specifically what he wants ahead of time, and you work to fulfill his vision? Or does he provide more of a loose idea, and you work together to bring it to life?
For the Witch Hazel album, it was not planned aside from the props and the location. But for Kill the Wolf and The Small Hours, we had fixed ideas. If he likes a painting or photograph, he'll send it to me straight away, and that idea usually gets used for something as time goes on.
Tell us about the genesis of the Phantom Birds cover. You've said that you and Matt selected the image from a previous shoot, since a new shoot wasn't an option due to lockdown. How did you decide that this was the one which suited the album best?
We had a lot of images, but finding the right picture to suit the mood of Phantom Birds was challenging. All that matters in the end is that it feels and looks like it's from the time the music being made is embracing.
We love that some of the album covers have unexpected surprises that aren't obvious at first glance, such as a hoof on Matt's left hand on the Kill the Wolf cover, and the double image of Matt sleeping on the back of Music for Insomniacs 4. Can you tell us how these ideas developed?
I think we both like to obsess about albums. When they were made, who by, who with. So it's nice to pass on my small details for other music fans to obsess on. It would be nice to have the time we had on Kill the Wolf to do that again.
As a note, too, Ben's influence and attention to detail are evident on the Beatmaker sleeve. It was a photo that was inspired by Mike Burkowski's famous portrait of Jimi Hendrix, which was eventually used as a cover for the compilation Both Sides of the Sky. It's a picture of Jimi Hendrix with the red in his hair, which was mimicked on Emma Noble, which is really amazing.
It's a very striking cover.
Mm-hmm.
For Gather Up, the book is gorgeous, and you are credited with the photography. There are so many outtakes and behind-the-scenes images which are fascinating to look at as compared to the final images that were used. Were you responsible for the layout of the book as well? Did Acid Jazz give you direction, or did they just ask you to dig up anything that you could find?
I do have a lot of posters, t-shirt designs, and obviously photographs of Matt, so I was quite involved in Gather Up, but I did not work on the final layout.
The final layout was actually the work of Jaffa / The Unknown. He's credited as both on the back of the album sleeves, Jaffa and or The Unknown. It's the same person, and he's a graphic designer. He's got an extensive history of work with Acid Jazz and other top record labels.
We've noticed that you have an affinity for both music and comedy. How did you get so intimately connected to both these worlds in Britain?
I've always loved both, but the two main starting points for me were working with Rich Fulcher from Snuffbox and making album covers for Matt. This helped me get a toe in both worlds.
And who are some of your favorite artists that you've worked with?
In the world of comedy, I enjoyed work with Jamie Demetrio and Adam Buxton. In music, the Blue Tones and Thomas Walsh.
Who have you done a shoot with that really surprised you as being different than you imagined?
Not everyone, but most people are less extroverted than you expect. But years of training means they have the ability to switch it on. When I photographed Rutger Hauer at that point, he was quite frail, but still had the ability to be Rutger Hauer on camera when he needed to be. I definitely identify with that.
Yeah, I didn't know by name who Rutger Hauer was. I had to look him up. The main thing that I recognized him from, he was in the series True Blood that was on HBO. So I was like, oh, that guy. I know who he's talking about.
He's in Blade Runner, right?
I don't know. Possibly. I have no idea.
Okay.
I know him from True Blood. That's it.
Okay, yeah, so I'm not crazy. So he is one of the leads in Blade Runner, which is my husband's all-time favorite movie. So we have a big full-size Blade Runner poster signed by the poster artist, Drew Struzan, as the central piece in our living room. He gives that famous speech about Tears in the Rain at the end of the movie.
I've never seen that movie.
Okay.
Oh, you gotta see Blade Runner.
Never seen that.
You would love it. It's
really
a great story and it's beautiful to look at.
Nice. I love that. I will watch it.
Okay. Do you prefer working more one-on-one with the artists for their individual needs? Or do you prefer the on-set unit photography that you do?
At this moment, I would love to be back on set, but it is always nice to work with people one-to-one. Being on set can be the start of your next one-to-one project.
And what has been your favorite set to work on?
Working on Toast is always the best set to work on.
Good answer.
Yep.
Any memories of particularly fun or funny incidents during a shoot you can relate?
Photographing Matt, John Hamm, and Brian Blessed in the same picture. It was very surreal. Well, the scene where they're all together is very surreal.
It really
too,
is.
So I'd imagine.
I liked what he said about being on set can be the start of your next one-on-one project. He was the set photographer, as I mentioned, for Year of the Rabbit, and then he did set photography for Cheaters, which is a Susan Wacoma show. She was in Year of the Rabbit. She played Mabel. And he's also done a lot of one-on-one photography with her, which I think, that's really a cool way to look at it, that being on set can start your next one-on-one project. I like that.
You mentioned on your blog that Taika Waititi commissioned you to shoot some images for the What We Do in the Shadows opening credits. And Matt has mentioned this in an interview as well. What can you tell us about that shoot?
I was working on Year of the Rabbit, and when Taika came in, I cheekily asked if I could take his portrait without jumping through the usual production hoops he would normally have to. I was very nervous, but Gerard, who was assisting me, was as always very cool. Taika reached out to Matt and asked for Gerard's details, as he needed a photographic assistant to shoot the opening titles of What We Do in the Shadows, and I came along and helped out. Matt tells a very funny story. I'm trying to remember which interview, but we can definitely find it and link it, about how he and Taika had gone out drinking the night before most of those stills were shot and were very hungover. And if memory serves, I think he might have actually been puking in between sets.
Who was? Matt was or Taika was?
We should double check this because I'm kind
Okay.
of going off memory, but both maybe. Matt seems to have awful hangovers.
You'd think he'd learn by now.
Yeah.
It's a lesson he's learned over and over, and it never sticks.
He's not, though. It's a lesson should be learning or have learned, but he's not learned it, apparently. He continues to do it.
And you know what? Same. I drink a lot less than I used to. I was never like a crazy drinker, but at this point, 2 cocktails and I'm gone.
That's funny.
Jesse, you've seen this firsthand because we've been to Epcot together, and you've seen me.
You did puke, though.
You've seen me
And
drink
not
around
that
the
I
world.
saw anyway. But yeah. We should
But
also
I was
mention
feeling it the next day, for sure.
we should also mention the Gerard that he's talking about in that previous response, but is Gerard Georgie Cole, who did the videos for One by One, Take My Hand. All of Matt's music videos was Gerard Georgie Cole. So that's who he's talking about.
What's your best advice to get started doing photography professionally?
My advice would be don't wait for somebody to tell you what to do. Just get out there and do it. If there's something you really love, use photography as a way of making a connection that might not be immediate, but it will pay off.
I love that advice. That's really good.
I do too.
Have you had compliments on your work that you found in particular touching for you?
It's always nice when people like your work, but it's particularly nice to win people over who have not worked with you and don't know what to expect. But comments-wise, it meant a lot what Matt said in the sleeve notes of Gather Up.
Matt always writes really lovely acknowledgments on the back of his record sleeves. This one was, I think encompassed the full 10 years of his working with acid jazz. But it says on the last page of the book, it says, many thanks to Ben Meadows for gathering up decades worth of stills and being a great photographer and friend. The Maypoles for their impressive skills, patience, and contributions. Phil Scragg for his work and staggering expertise on the live album. Bolshe for her enthusiasm and invaluable assistance. Mike at Rimshot for his precious ears. And Jaffa for all the sleeve designs. I'd also like to thank Ed, Dean, Dom, Lucy, Barrett, Danny, Ben, and everyone else who has passed through acid jazz over the years. If it wasn't for acid jazz, I doubt you'd have got to hear any of the songs included in this box set. I've loved every minute. Here's hopefully to the next 10 years. Matt, summer 2021.
It's very sweet.
Very heartfelt.
It is.
Yeah.
And while we're reading thanks, thank you so much to Ben for your thoughtful answers on our questions. We really appreciate you sharing your insight and your time with us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That was actually the first person we ever reached out to talk to us, and finally he agreed to do it. So we're very happy that we got this opportunity. So thank you, Ben. All right, we've talked a lot about the book and it's worth it. The book is amazing. The one that came with the vinyl box set is 64 pages of big glossy photos with a history of Matt's first 10 years of acid jazz running throughout. There's a really lovely sleeve notes that provide the narrative. We will probably link that entire thing so whoever doesn't have this box set can read it. It's really great. Forgot who wrote it.
Chris
Who wrote it.
Catchpole, who's a music journalist.
Perfect. So my only complaint about the book is there are no captions. So there's zero context for some of the photos. For example, on page 4 at the top right corner, there's what appears to be a clay bust of Matt's head. The only thing I know about that bust is that I think it was Matt's uncle that sculpted it, but I can provide no more insight. So it would be nice to know more about that because that's the only time I'd ever seen the photo.
When I got the box set, that was one of the first questions I had was,
Yeah.
what's with that
What's to do
sculpture?
with us? Yeah.
It's very cool looking.
And then you get in, I think everybody's seen the photos of Matt sitting next to Eddie Pillar with a young girl holding a gun to his head while he signs his first contract with Acid Jazz. In the book, there's a whole series of outtakes, and as an American, this whole thing makes me cringe so much because she's actually got her finger on the trigger, and I hate that so much. So I can only hope it was a fake gun or a decommissioned gun. I'm sure it was in the UK, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair. They don't have the access that we do. For
Oh,
sure.
God.
Although in one of the pandemic era train guy videos that Bob Mortimer produced, Matt does wave around a pistol, I'm assuming decommissioned as well, that was taken in his home. So maybe Matt's a collector. Maybe
I don't
he's just a
know.
boy who likes guns.
It's so weird because it seems Matt is so British, and his particular, what seems like a fascination with guns is like, it just seems like it goes against his character in some way, but it like snuff box, there's guns, there's like, I feel like there's that scene in the IT crowd where he's waving a gun even though
Wow,
he
a
didn't,
gun!
right?
Yeah.
So it
That might be my single favorite moment in all of the IT crowd. Him finding that and then testing it out by putting it in
it
his
makes
mouth.
me cringe. It makes me cringe. Oh gosh. Anyway, so after that series of photos from the contract signing, you get into some photos of Matt in his flat, which we discussed a little bit already, but it's always fun to see a glimpse of what inspires somebody who inspires you. So I think it's fun to kind of see what he had on his walls at the time, what he had on his bookshelves, what you can make out, little trinkets and stuff. His flat at that time was like very Gothic Victorian, very dark, cozy though. And then he's got these massive floor to ceiling bookshelves just full of books and DVDs. The majority of what I could make out from them was just dramas and thrillers. He has the entire series of Unsolved Mysteries, which stood out to me because I have that too. It's like in the shiny box with shiny silver letters. And then
He actually has 3 Unsolved Mysteries box sets that you can see on his shelf. So I don't know if those are
I think it's like the different
sets.
seasons, maybe.
Yeah.
And the only comedy that I can make out, other than a couple of copies of Snuffbox, was Ghostbusters, which I thought was kind of funny. I mean, if you're gonna have one comedy, that would be the one, a good one to have for sure.
I have not seen that in a long time. I'm due for a rewatch.
So fantastic. I'm one of the few people that really like the second one too. This probably like completely takes away any of my street cred, of which I had none, but I like the second one too.
Well, now how can we take any of your opinions seriously?
I know.
I mean,
I know. It's
20
like
episodes worth of song reviews. I think you just
I really shit the bed. Oh well. It is what it is. Unpopular opinion.
Because this is what we do, because we are obsessives and do the obsessive deep dives, so you don't have to. We went through the pictures of his shelves with a fine-tooth comb, or rather of a magnifying glass, and did the best we could to make out some of the book titles as well as the DVDs visible on the shelves. Book titles in particular, I think, are incredibly illuminating and very on brand for Matt. The ones we could make out, this almost sounds like it's made up because it's so on the nose. But there's a book on Roxy music, vintage synthesizers, a book called The London Pub, Sherlock Holmes, Charles Dickens, and a book called The X Factory Inside the American Hardcore Industry. If that's not just Matt in a nutshell.
Yeah, definitely.
The DVDs we could see, there's what look like David Bowie and Elvis Presley concert films. I think those are DVDs and not books. It's a little hard to tell. Those 3 Unsolved Mysteries box sets we mentioned, the Godfather box set, Loot, Man on Fire, Elizabeth, Watchmen, The Prestige, Goodfellas, I Am Legend, Messiah, Invisible Man, State of Play, Churchill, a Nick Broomfield collection, Moon, which Matt, of course, has a small part in, and I'm sure there's more, but at some point I had to move on with my life.
The thing with the movies is it's hard to know which ones he actually went out and purchased because he wanted to see, or ones that were maybe given to him as like screeners or something like that.
No, very true.
It's fascinating though. I love I've spent quite a lot of time like staring and seeing what he has in his collection. It'd be so fascinating to just go through his giant bookshelf and see everything he has.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can tell we have bookshelves all lining our living room, which are kind of the same way. You also see like trinkets, a magnifying glass, a glass bottle, some photographs. It looks like it's just kind of a catch-all for stuff that maybe didn't want to get rid of, but also wasn't sure what to do with.
I always like trinkets on a bookshelf or a DVD shelf. It adds interest.
I have my bookshelf looks the exact same. We even have glass bottles just randomly.
Yeah, mine looks the same too. So after those photos, there's a bunch of outtakes from the Witch Hazel photo shoot, and then a bunch of tour photos and behind the scenes photos. And then Courtney, you found a really cool thing that I didn't even notice even after scrutinizing the book a ton of times. I didn't even see it.
Ooh.
Yeah, on page 16, there's, I believe, 3 small behind behind the scenes photos from the solo video shoot. Those are at the top of page 16. Would love to see more of these, especially given some of the talent involved in the solo shoot, but we do get a little glimpse.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting because I really had scrutinized the book, and when I looked at that, I think when I saw them, I thought they were just behind the scenes photos from a gig, and then when you pointed that out, I was like, oh my god, those are the solo video pictures from the solo video shoot. That's really cool.
I did not catch that either.
Yeah, they're very
Good one,
small.
Courtney.
After that, we get on to like around page 20. There's photos taken during the Kill the Wolf promo that were in Matt's flat. We talked about that earlier, about the making of Kill the Wolf. You can see the original Music for Insomniacs paintings on the wall, which are actually part of a series of paintings. The third photo on that page is Matt holding a guitar. This guitar is one that he built from scratch with his uncle. That's like handmade guitar, which is awesome.
That's cool.
Also, it's like another little piece where a caption would have been really...
Yeah, because how would you just
that
know
adds
that?
so much context.
It does. It adds so much context. Like, we know that because this is what we do. We look through all this stuff, but like the average person who bought this box set would not have known that. And I think that's really interesting to know.
I mean, just being able to build your own guitar, that's such an impressive skill to me.
Yeah. After that, we get into a bunch of the Kill the Wolf photo shoot outtakes and more tour posters. Page 28 through 29 is a 2-page photo of Matt and the Duckworth-Lewis method, which is Neil Hannon and our friend Thomas Walsh. I don't know if that would have been abundantly obvious who those guys were, if you're an American, if you're not a fan of Pugwash or Thomas Walsh or Neil Hannon. So another place where captions would have been good. The photos on the right are of Matt from the waist down. That was part of this Duckworth-Lewis method album cover, but those photos had to be scrapped. I think there was some copyright issue or something. So it only exists on the promo CD that went out. I think there's some pictures inside the album too. I'm still trying to obtain the album, and it's very hard to find, so working on it. But that's what that's what that is. He did voiceovers for Duckworth-Lewis method on a few of their songs,
and sat in with a few of their live performances as well. There's
Yes.
some video that exists of that on YouTube.
There is, yep. And then after that, there's a couple of photos of the alternative art for Music for Insomniacs, which is amazing. There's
so beautiful.
It really is. I love that art. I love the series. I love it. I wish she would do prints, because I would absolutely frame those and put them on my wall. I'm obsessed
all over my
with
house.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with all of the Music for Insomniacs art. There's a 2-page photo spread of the back image of the Music for Insomniacs 4, which includes the double image of Matt asleep in the chair. And then there's also the back photo image on the next 2 pages of the Music for Insomniacs sleeve.
This is actually the uncropped version of that Music for Insomniacs 4 image. The frame's a little tighter in the one that made it to the back of the single. So it's kind of cool to see what is off to the side. There's a table of some books and some objects. It's a little hard to make out what they are. So if anyone is more eagle-eyed than us, feel free to send that to us, because we live for that kind of thing.
Okay, so here's another issue with context. On page 36 and 37, there's a 2-page spread of the maypoles on stage. There's no caption. There's no way to know what it's from unless you actually know what that stage is, which as an American, I do not. I have confirmed, though, by what they were wearing that day, that this is a photo from their performance at the Royal Albert Hall in September of 2015 when they opened for Steven Wilson. So I know that show was a huge deal for everyone. We heard James Sedge talk about it when he was on, how they were all so nervous and so excited. So just put a freaking caption. So.
Put a caption, yeah. Like, it would take no effort at all.
So after that, there are several pages of outtakes from the Small Hours and Night Terrors photo shoots. These photos are absolutely amazing, especially the Small Hours ones. They so perfectly capture the moodiness of that album. I don't know how they ended up with what they did. It would have been so hard for me to choose one from the photos that are there. But on page 41, on the top left side of the page, there's the full photo, which became the cover art, and it's shown with a box, which indicated where the photo was ultimately cropped to be the album cover. So really amazing photo shoot that was.
Really amazing, and Matt just seems kind of loose, and he's really kind of getting into a lot of different poses.
Mhm.
I'm just going to say it. Matt is not like a natural photographic subject. He can sometimes look a little stiff, and really all credit to Ben Meadows.
I also think it could be helpful because when we went back to those questions earlier, Ben mentioned that for the small hours photo shoot, they had an idea of what they wanted to do. So Matt may have known in his head what the final outcome he wanted was, and he was just trying to work to get to how he envisioned it in his head. But yeah, he does seem very posable in this photo shoot, which I think he seems to me like he's a reluctant subject a lot of the time.
Yes.
Like he's taking photos because he has to, not because he wants to. I totally get that. So, but this one, it seems like he wanted to be part of the process.
And
Yeah.
something that we didn't talk as much about, but is a big part of the book, is we also see photo outtakes from the Witch Hazel shoot and the Kill the Wolf shoot. Some of those Kill the Wolf outtakes also make it onto the 10th anniversary LP. And it's really sort of this, it's really a similar theme of just kind of watching Matt try different stuff, loosen up. It's very cool to see.
And beautiful photos. Like there's this one photo you can see from the Kill the Wolf shoot where he has the pheasant and he has the fox, and it's just like the sun breaking through the trees in the background. Like I want that photo. I want to make a print of that photo and hang it somewhere. Like it's just, they're really well done.
I just want to be
I find
there.
it kind of hilarious that you can't see this on the finished album cover, but on those Witch Hazel photos, under his cloak, he's just wearing like a button down, just like a white business shirt.
It's got like a
that's
paisley
so Matt.
print or something on it. It's untucked and he's got it's like a light blue paisley print or something. Yeah, I noticed that too. It's kind of
Right,
funny.
it's just something you would wear to your like accounting job.
Right, maybe. Or barbecue.
Yeah. Right. I want to give a special shout out to the cupcakes on page 45. There's a big picture of some custom cupcakes. I believe were done by a fan. They look incredible. They're really elaborately designed. There's an Acid Jazz logo, I think a badger. Yeah, props for the cupcakes.
Yeah.
They're very impressive.
The cupcake of toast is just amazing.
Moving on, page 46, there's some behind the scenes photos from when the Maypoles performed Take My Hand live on Channel 4. This ran during the closing credits of the series finale of Toast of London.
It was actually episode 4, series 3. It was Bob a Job. It wasn't the finale.
Oh, it wasn't the finale. Why did I think it was the finale? Okay. Well,
it would make sense for it to be the finale, but no, it was
It
like
would.
midway through the season.
I thought they played it during the final episode. Okay, so it wasn't the finale. But we'll post a link. There's YouTube video of it. I want to say it's in the DVD box set special features, but
I don't think it is.
Is it not? I thought it was.
I don't
know. I'll have to go back and look and see if it is, but I know when it was on Netflix here, that wasn't included on it. I don't know why.
think just
actually.
licensing issues.
Maybe it was. So I don't think it actually exists anymore, other than potentially the box set. But there is video of it on YouTube, so we'll link to that. And then this was actually something that Ben Meadows said was his favorite part of working with the Maypoles, was this live performance of Take My Hand. So I think that's pretty interesting. Of all the things that he did with the Maypoles, this is what really stood out to be his favorite part.
It seemed like this performance was a huge deal to all of the Maypoles. I believe that Phil and James had mentioned it in our interviews with them. And Cecilia Phage, who is active on Twitter and Instagram, had mentioned this as one of her favorite performing experiences as well. She shares an anecdote, talks about how right before the camera started rolling, Matt turned and said, brown toga time, which I'm assuming is a reference to shitting yourself. Right? Am I interpreting that?
I don't know. I would imagine. I've never heard that in the history of my life. I don't know if that's a Britishism or if that's a Mattism.
I Googled it and nothing came up.
It's a
so I'm thinking it's a
Mattism.
Mattism, of which there are many.
We really need to make a list of these.
Jesse, you do the social media.
I do.
I think you've struck on something. There's taking your foot off the cunt pedal.
Yeah. The world is my lobster.
The world is my lobster.
I say that all the time, and every time I say it, I get an immediate look of confusion. Like, isn't it oyster? No, it's lobster.
The fact that he refers to records as records, I can't even say it. Like I said, British accents, not my forte, but Rekud.
There's an
is his
apostrophe in there
chosen.
too. Isn't there?
Is there? Maybe sometimes.
REK''UD.
The man has a way with language.
He does. So the last few pages of the book are the front and back of each album. And it's cool to see them laid out like this. That's not a view you often get to see. So you have the front and back image. You actually have the back and the front image next to it. But notably, the orange version of Opium is not in the book. But somehow somebody managed to sneak in the cover of the original release of Opium, which was included in the Kill the Wolf box set. That's the one that has the picture of the poppy on the cover. But yeah, that's the only reference to Opium in the entire book.
They make a throwaway comment in the opening intro, like very throwaway.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's like, oh yeah, and there's opium, like fucking opium. Like they don't care. It's funny.
That's right.
Justice for opium.
And then the book wraps up with a photo of Matt's current studio, which is always fascinating to look at because he's got so many fun things in there with buttons and knobs, and it looks like it would be a really fun time to just explore that space.
Absolutely. I believe that photo is also used, or a very similar one, is used in the CD art for The Blue Elephant. Unfortunately, it's not part of the vinyl, I guess because they just didn't want to make it a gatefold. But for those of you who are completists or just into buying CDs, you can scrutinize that image as well.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I don't have any CDs just because I don't have a means to play them, so...
Yeah, oh my god, can you imagine if you start collecting CDs as well?
Don't tempt me with
so much money.
Neither the CD version nor the vinyl version are available on Acid Jazz website anymore, but they are available secondhand or through online retailers. So if you don't have it, I really, really suggest that you get it. It's just a really, really well done box set. It was expensive, but it was actually, I think, worth it. There's so much in it. So that concludes the book. And then I think we have a few interviews. And then there's some more that we'll talk about when we get into the track breakdown.
Of course, the box set is billed as a celebration, commemoration of Matt's decade on Acid Jazz Records, which is pretty funny to me because a few of the tracks on the Rarities disc predate Acid Jazz. We'll talk about that. However, this is a celebration of 10 years on Acid Jazz. Matt has spoken in many interviews, more than we can cite here, about his admiration for the Acid Jazz label, his how he grew up listening to Acid Jazz and used to use them to source rare tracks you couldn't find anywhere else. He's talked quite a bit in multiple interviews about meeting Eddie Pillar and how that relationship came to be. Even though he's given a few variations on this story, my favorite came from an interview he did with Shindig magazine promoting The Blue Elephant back in 2021. Shindig asked, "How did you come to their attention?" And Matt said it was through a mutual friend. He heard I'd made this folk album. This is about 2009. And he said, I think Eddie Pillar, Acid Jazz co-founder, might be interested in this. I was like, really? I just recorded it all myself, for myself. I was just going to put it out free on the internet. I never told Eddie I was a fan of the label and a fan of him. It's a good job because he has the biggest head, so it wouldn't have done any good at all if I'd told him that. So I went down there and we sat looking at each other while he played my whole album, and I thought, if he doesn't like it, fair enough. He didn't have any pre-existing knowledge of me whatsoever. He hadn't seen anything I'd done on the TV either. We got to the end of the album and he's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's do the whole album. And I was like, Jesus Christ. That of course became Witch Hazel in 2011. Honestly, I didn't expect it. I already had the front cover. I'd mixed and mastered it myself. So he really didn't have to do anything. The rest is kind of history. There hasn't been more than a couple of days since that we haven't spoken to each other. We immediately got on that day, and I kind of knew that I'd be continuing the journey with this guy. I knew this guy would be in my life most days from now on, and that's the way it's been. He and Dean Rutland, the Acid Jazz label director, have been everything in terms of my musical outlet. They back me in every single thing I've wanted to do. And if you're a fan of Matt's, you are probably familiar with Eddie. Eddie has had small cameo parts on Toast of London and Toast of Tinseltown. Matt is a frequent guest on Totally Wired Radio's internet radio shows. It's a legendary bromance.
A legendary bromance. I love that. It really is.
Okay, so from the Super Deluxe Edition, November 12th, 2021, he was asked, "But this project must have forced you to look back a little bit, because even though you said you left it to the label, you must have personally gone through some of your outtakes in your archives." Matt said, "I did, but it was made easy because we'd already talked about doing a deluxe of Witch Hazel, which is the first album I'd released with them, so had already been told to go through all the Witch Hazel outtakes to find anything that was interesting. So I'd already done that. That was half the work done because there was a lot of other things that were recorded around that time. So I just included some of that, but all the other stuff, like books, etc., that was done by the label and done by Ben the photographer, who's been around since the start. He's got everything. I don't keep anything. I don't keep any photographs from back when. So it could only have come from him because he kept everything. He's the one who took all the photographs, so he was the best person for that job."
Can I call bullshit? Because
I know.
first of all, we've seen glimpses, not of Matt's current place, but we've seen glimpses of his old flats. There are photos up. Also, in that Kill the Wolf making of video that we've already mentioned a few times, you can briefly see the camera pan over, and on his wall he has the hangman portrait from Snuffbox.
Yeah.
He has a giant painting of himself on the wall. Not a photo, but don't tell me that he doesn't look backwards. And, as well he
Yeah.
should. That was a huge accomplishment.
Right. He has to have them somewhere digitally on his phone. I just don't think it's feasible that he wouldn't have any swag from his concerts, nothing from that time. It just doesn't make sense that he wouldn't. Maybe it's just
He
not
likes to-
organized, where it's not something he'd be able to like offer up and share, but I don't think he doesn't have anything.
He likes to depict himself as very unsentimental, and I think we have plenty of evidence to the contrary. I'm not saying that he's someone who lives in the past. He clearly doesn't, but I think he is more proud of his body of work than he lets on, and again,
Yeah.
well, he should be. I mean, he rubber stamped this box set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, shall we dive into the Gather Up rarities?
Yes, rarities
Yes.
and release. Let's go. Oh yeah, there's a quote though.
So, in an article from We Are Cults from October 23rd, 2021, they asked Matt, "Going back to Gather Up, you've included lots of extra tracks on there, such as an alternative introduction to Witch Hazel." Yeah, there's a whole load of other extras. A whole load of stuff for Witch Hazel that never made it onto the album. The story of the dog killing the fella, for example. I didn't put any of that on. I had a lot of ideas for that album. You just whittle things down to bare essentials in the end.
So the first track is called Bigger Than a Dog, and as Tara just mentioned, this is the original Witch Hazel intro. So it's just basically a musical intro, and then it's followed by a conversation between Matt and somebody else, presumably an actor friend, an older person. There's a mention of Max Gland, which I thought was kind of funny, because Max Gland is a name that Matt has also used, like, from the very beginning. He had a character called Gland Max in that Game Over show it ran from 1998 to 2001. I don't know which seasons Matt was on it, because at some point he was fired. So
For
there's
an Exorcist parody sketch called Fear Pushed Through the Ring.
Oh.
I really
That was
want to
the-
see that, because
I
how
know.
bad could it have been to have been fired?
Yeah.
Oh God, I would
The
love to see
sketch
that.
that Glenn Max is from, I believe, is called Not Doctor Who.
Yes.
Am I making that up?
No, you're not making it up. It's something about Doctor
And,
Who. I think it's not Doctor Who.
I don't know where she found it, but our friend Bat Mary, who is kind of a Matt mega fan on social media, she posted this on her TikTok. So anyone wanting to search this out, it is archived on TikTok. He also uses the name on the ADBC featurette on the credits for that special feature.
I totally
I watched
forgot
that
about
again, and the camera work is credited to Max Gland. There's also a few other familiar names which pop up.
Mhm.
I think he pays tribute to a few family members.
Yeah.
The name Max Gland was also most prominently used in the Buried Alive episode of Toast of London, one of my favorite episodes of the show. Many of you probably remember that Toast in that episode works for a deranged director named Max Gland, played by Matt Holness
Yeah.
in a little bit of a reunion. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, do yourself a favor and seek it out. It's on the
It's
Roku channel in the
It's
US
so
right
good.
now.
It's
Good stuff.
fantastic. So anyway, as Matt is talking with his fellow actor, they're walking through a field, and the other guy mentions something about seeing something in the shadows, which Matt says is probably the farmer's dog. And then at the end, there's a really loud jump scare with them being attacked by what sounds like a big cat.
Well, Berry, it's very good of you to invite me down like this, but why on earth did you leave London without telling anybody?
I have to finish my book. If I don't finish it, they won't pay me.
Well, that's all very well, but the country. I do hope there's some public house to which we can resort where I can get a bracer or three.
That's where we're going. It's not far, just across the next field.
Oh, good. What's that?
What?
In the shadows.
Probably the farmer's dog. Anyway, how's Gwendolyn?
Gwendolyn. Oh, she's absolutely wonderful.
We trod the boards together.
Really? Well, I didn't know she had antecedents. But there's definitely something there, and it looks like it's coming towards us.
Well, like I say, it's probably the farmer's dog.
It's bigger than a dog.
Gwendolyn. Now, she used to step out with Max Gland.
So I've heard, but I don't think one needs to worry about that, you know. I haven't seen him since...
As soon as I heard this, my mind immediately went to The Beast of Bodmin Moor. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, maybe some of our English listeners, but I'm really into the whole cryptology and cryptids, and I like to hear like the local legends of these mythical beasts and stuff. So I knew I had watched something on TV about the Beast of Bodmin Moor a while back, and that's where my brain immediately went to. So the Beast of Bodmin Moor is supposedly a large black cat with yellow eyes about the size of a panther. Bodmin Moor is in Cornwall, and sightings began there in the 1970s. In 1995, there were so many sightings that the English government actually opened an investigation. Sightings have not been limited to Cornwall either. There's a large black cat that's been spotted all around the English countryside. The sightings have become so prevalent that even on the current season of Expedition X, which is on the Discovery Channel in the United States, they traveled to England to investigate this, and the entire episode was about these big black cat sightings, and they actually came up with some compelling evidence. So in addition to the big black cat, there's also the legend of the black shuck, which is basically a ghostly devil dog and was thought to be the inspiration for Arthur Conan Doyle's The Hound of the Baskervilles. So he mentioned in that interview a big dog. It sounds like more of a big cat, but either one of those might have been the inspiration for whatever got them in the end of that jump scare at the end of the bigger than a dog.
It sounded like a dog to me, but clearly the insinuation is that whatever it is, it's not a dog. And that is something that Matt, I'm sure, is familiar with, right? He loves the folklore, he loves the legends. That's really interesting. That's not something I was familiar with at all.
No, now I'm going to Google that after. That's fascinating.
It's
I love
really,
that stuff.
really fascinating. If you have the Discovery Channel, it was an episode on the latest season of Expedition X, which is a spin-off of Expedition Unknown with Joss Gates. I love the show. I love anything that has to do with the paranormal and, you know, cryptology and folklore. So yeah, that was like, as Matt would say, right up my street.
Very cool. This track, musically and thematically, this track bridges the gap between Opium and Witch Hazel. It sounds like something that would fit right in on Opium, both in the funk backing and also just the spoken word narrative piece. But like you mentioned, Jesse, it has that folklore influence that is so prominent on Witch Hazel. I think this would have taken the album in a very different direction that ultimately I'm happy it didn't go. First of all, I just think it's fun, it's interesting, it's kind of funny, but musically it reminds me of Rain Came Down, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
It also just he would have been taken less seriously as a musician had he gone this route with the album. And it's the opening track, so even if the rest of the album stayed what it is, this is what people are going to hear, this is what listeners streaming are going to hear, and then either shut off or keep going. So I definitely think this was one. There's kind of an odd specificity to a lot of what he talks about. He talks about finishing a book. He talks about someone named Gwendolyn. Makes me wonder if these are kind of nods to maybe his personal life. But yeah, it's a curiosity for sure. not one that is really essential.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% that it definitely would have changed the tone of the entire album, and I don't think that it would have been taken seriously. So I'm very glad that he changed it.
Nope, he's a good editor because at least he realized that this is not the way to go.
So next we come to a stripped down acoustic version of Take My Hand, recorded live on Absolute Radio. This was recorded during an appearance on April 18th, 2011. There's an interview with mostly him. Cecilia is there as well and speaks up a bit. And he does live acoustic versions of Take My Hand and Song for Rosie. It's really a treat to listen to.
So take my hand, we'll disappear to a pub that's not too far from here. Though I don't know you and you don't know me, I just had to talk to you, you see. The arrogance, a foolish move if you take a risk. Your odds improve and you don't know me and I don't know you. I'm not weird or clear, my aim is true. Everybody I know these days is boring me or ignoring me, but not you.
It's an interesting rendition. There's a few other videos of Matt doing live acoustic versions of Take My Hand. This is easily my favorite of those. It strips down the heavy production and lets the song structure stand on its own. Something that is interesting is that he does sing in harmony with Cecilia Phage, but they sing at the same octave. It really, in a lot of ways, replicates the layered vocal effect on the original. Matt loves to layer his own vocals, and while this is a live version, it kind of has that deep, resonant effect. This cover really works because he really sells the passion and even the slight pleading behind the song. Maybe this is a little blasphemous to say, but in a lot of the subsequent live performances on YouTube, which are with a full band, I think he kind of loses that pleading quality, right? It's his best known song. It's in a lot of ways his signature song. And honestly, sometimes when he performs it, he sounds like he's going through the motions, but he doesn't here. There's a real mournful quality, and there's a sort of simple recorder solo from Cecilia. It's really just a beautiful rendition, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to hear it here since it's kind of been lost.
I don't really like this version very much. I was kind of wondering what the thought process was about including this particular version of it. Maybe it was just because they saw what you saw with it. The thing that I really like, I get what you're saying about when you sing a song over and over again, which he would have done on tour, singing Take My Hand over and over again. Eventually, I'm sure, get a little bit tired of singing it. Mm-hmm. So I can see where you would think that the intensity would be reduced a bit. But the thing that I really like about the version that's on the live album, which is my favorite still of Matt's songs, because I think that one does sound particularly heartfelt and particularly kind of almost pleading. So I'm just overall not a huge fan of this version of it. Again, he changed the lyrics on this from weird or clear rather than being weird or queer. Did you notice that? He does that quite a bit.
And he's done that on pretty much every live rendition.
Yeah.
It seems like he regretted the original lyric.
Yeah, and this was like a super early live rendition, so he must have had regrets from the very beginning. I don't know. I don't think he uses the word queer in the wrong way. I mean, queer, the original use of the word queer was a synonym of weird. So I think that it's fine to use it in that context. I get why he would maybe have a little hesitation, but I think because he's very courteous and conscientious about things that he says and what he puts out. So I get it, but it's noticeable. And this is also a funny anecdote. Courtney reached out to Joan, who was on our show. She's the lead singer of the Christmas song. Courtney reached out to see if she had the full version of this. And this is also where we learn how Matt and Cecilia met, which was on stage, apparently with Cecilia in a bikini. That's all we know. She did
That's
not
all the
elaborate.
Context.
There's zero context. So anyway,
I'm
that's how they met.
assuming this was an Opium era show because that sounds like something that would happen during an Opium era show, but we really don't know.
Oh, no.
I mean, Matt also played with different bands throughout his college days, his university days, and we don't really know how long they've known each other, so it's another mystery.
Yeah. Cecilia in a bikini on stage was not something that really was on my bingo card for how they met. Not that she couldn't pull off a bikini because she's gorgeous, but like she just doesn't seem like she would be on stage in bikini. So I don't know.
But we were all young
We're all
once.
young.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with Courtney 100%, and I find this stripped back version of the song is so lovely. Like it just really showcases their voices, and they are such good singers, and it seems very heartfelt. I really like this version. I'm glad they included it, and yeah, no, I find it beautiful. I've listened to this one a lot.
I like the version of Song for Rosie that he sang during this recording better than I like the version of Take My Hand. But
Maybe swap
I do
them.
too.
that's just me.
It's
What do I know?
definitely my favorite version of Song for Rosie that he's done. And that's not a song where I'm in love with the album version, but stripped down, it's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth noting that when Acid Jazz first released this box set, this was the teaser. This was the first single they released. Not a surprise, since Take My Hand really is his signature song. I have a fond recollection of, I was actually at work late because I had a job at that point that kept me there all hours, and logged onto YouTube to play some of Matt's stuff in the background while I did some documentation. And this popped up. It had just been posted an hour or so ago, and I'm like, they're doing a greatest hits. And I was half right on that.
Yep.
But I, jumped on Facebook and posted that we were getting this new set, and here we are today.
Moving on to Autumn, which is another Witch Hazel outtake. It starts off with bass right up front, and there's a guitar melody behind it. So the guitar seems kind of a little bit distant and far away. And then it switches to this repeating rhythmic melody, and it just continues to build in intensity as it goes on. It ultimately reaches a crescendo with the addition of what sounds like maybe bongos added in, some sort of percussion. So it starts off sort of tranquil and pastoral, and it ends up triumphantly, but it feels a little bit melancholy also at the same time, like there's a sadness there. So anybody that follows me on Instagram, I posted kind of a photo without context of the Burt Bacharach soundtrack to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. To me, this particular song sounds so much like something that could be used in a movie scene. I can't quite put my finger on it exactly, but I see it as an old movie, specifically like a Western kind of a montage scene, maybe like a climactic scene towards the end, when maybe somebody's riding off into the sunset. And, it's triumphant, but it's also a little bit sad. And so I pulled out this record, and it really is a little Burt Bacharach-esque. It really sounds like something that could have fit in onto the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid soundtrack. I know he's a fan of that movie, so I don't know if that maybe was a little bit of inspiration. But
I'm also a fan of Burt Bacharach.
Right, yeah. So I don't think I was crazy when that image popped into my head, because I'm like, okay, I really do feel like it could have fit with this type of a movie. So the movie's very funny, but there's also some touching moments and stuff, and I could really see this playing in that. It's just really intangible feeling that I'm trying my best to articulate. It feels very much like a movie score type song to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely get that.
I was actually thinking, listening to a lot of these albums, the rarities and all that, a lot of it is just musical, and I'm just thinking, like, how come Matt's music, I guess in general, all of his music, how come it's not in more movies? Like, it's so good, and a lot of it's so kind of thematic and would really fit in with, certain genres and moods and all this stuff, and I'm surprised that he hasn't ever really been approached.
Well, I mean,
that
that's
was
simplicity is sort of what that was meant for.
Yeah.
So he said.
But his music's not in any movies except for Moon, where they just play like a little snippet.
Theme from Snuffbox is in Dread. That's the only other one I know.
That's what I was thinking of. Okay, it's Dread. It's not in Moon.
I don't think it's in
I
Moon.
haven't seen
Okay,
it.
it's in Dread.
He has done the score for a few mostly smaller indie movies. He did the score for the wedding video, and I believe a few Witch Hazel songs are in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Really cute little film.
The woman is in that, and From the Manger to the Mortuary is in that. I also did the score for Saxondale. I mentioned this later on in my notes, but I think this is one of the things that Matt is really, really, really underrated for. And I think that's interesting that you brought that up now, because I literally have this in my notes for a different track. You know, we always talk about him, how amazing it is he's a multi-instrumentalist, that he writes his own music, he's really great lyricist. I think he's super underrated for songs like this because it shows how great of a composer he is. I think he doesn't get enough credit for that.
Yeah, and I really love that. Like that you put that so eloquently, but that's exactly how I feel.
So I think you both feel a bit more favorable towards this song than I do, which is not to say I hate it. It just sort of exists for me. I wonder about its placement or its intended placement on Witch Hazel, because I sound like a broken record. I feel like every record, every album we've reviewed, I've talked about how Matt loves an overture. I would guess that's because of the Jesus Christ Superstar influence. And this feels like an overture. It feels like kind of the function that An Awakening ends up playing on the final album.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would have fit elsewhere on the album. It does have that slow build, Jesse, that you spoke to. There's a little bit of a shift at 44 seconds. It feels, I just saw the image of light breaking through clouds. It feels like it gets brighter. But ultimately, for me, there wasn't a lot of momentum to this track, and that just makes it a little bit dull.
It sounds more like a background piece. It's not a standalone.
I can agree with that.
Then we get into The Dawn, which is from the MySpace EP Summer Sun from 2010. This is one of the things that are on this record that predate Acid Jazz. The Summer Sun EP was self-released by Matt on MySpace in 2010 and consisted of 6 tracks. The Dawn, Last Road Home, On a High, parentheses, The Sky is Burning Bright, Gather Up, Dark Beach, and Farewell Summer Sun. And you can still find all of these tracks if you Google it. The whole thing still exists online, not on MySpace.
I believe all the videos have been uploaded to YouTube.
Yes, I think you're right.
I am kind of obsessed with this song. I think it's just gorgeous, and I do think that it could have fit on Witch Hazel, and in my mind, it could have kind of been swapped for Roosting Time as the outro. And I think you don't, well, I'm not saying that it should have. It could have. That's just in my mind where, when I was imagining it, I'm like, where would I put this on Witch Hazel? And I was like, I think I'm going to put it at the end. But then Roosting Time's so good. I think it was the right choice not to include it. I don't know. I kind of would have included it, but that's just me. I trust his editing.
It's another song that just starts very subtly and just builds with a repeating melody over and over again. And when I listen to it, to me, you know, you listen sometimes with your eyes closed and headphones on and you get in the zone. And I have this impression of the literal dawning of a new day, but maybe the night before was a little bit rough and you're determined to put that behind you. So the whole thing sounds like cautiously optimistic. Like it doesn't sound happy, but it sounds like possibly you can have a better day the next day. So I really love this piece. There's not a whole lot to it, but I like that the image that it kind of evokes in my head.
I'm glad this song does a lot for both of you. I wish I could say the same. I don't hate it. I'm not about to rag on it. It doesn't evoke any kind of strong emotion for me. It feels simplistic. I understand that's part of the intent, is that it has that kind of pounding rhythm, vaguely tribal feel. I am pretty sure that you can hear owl sounds around 25 seconds in.
No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, they're muted, and I had to listen a few times to make sure it wasn't just birds outside
Oh.
of my house. But definitely owl sounds. And the drifting notes of the recorder and trombone are nice. But yeah, this just works for me more as a sketch than a song. And because of that, just wasn't very memorable for me. I really, even though I've listened to this a lot over the past few weeks and I'm talking about it now, I don't think I could hum it. It just doesn't stick for me.
I think I have this on one of my Spotify playlists. I think I have it on my Focus playlist just because I really do like it. But I agree with you that it does seem a bit more like a sketch. But I think it could have been articulated into something to have been released elsewhere.
All right. Well, speaking of songs that could or have been articulated into full songs, next on the album, we get to the Snuffbox live loop. This is just a loop that was used as an intro to live performances between 2005 and 2012. It builds on the song. To me, this has always been a disco song, and that is not a bad thing in my mind. But it's basically a disco song. It has that 4/4 beat. I think I used that right. Some of you who are musicologists can tell me, like, you're full of shit, Courtney. But 4/4 beat, that's the disco thing, right? I think this was written for a specific function, which is to amp up the audience in a live show, in a live context. And I think it does exactly that. And I don't have a whole lot more to say about it.
It's just all synth. The whole thing is synth, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There is a bonus CD that was released with the Snuffbox DVD, at least the American release of the Snuffbox DVD. I have it. It was actually one I didn't have to buy. We just happened to own Snuffbox even before I went down the Matt rabbit hole. And he hasn't released it elsewhere, but it's not on that, which is interesting. It just kind of exists as a little live fragment.
Funny that you mentioned that. We'll get into that later.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that.
Yeah, and it would have been nice to have experienced that at a live concert.
There's still a lot of videos floating out there on YouTube of performances from those days. A lot of them aren't great quality because phones weren't that great quality then, but you can see him projecting kind of graphics and visuals behind him, and it's just cool to see his evolution. It's so different than what his live performances became, just judging from what we've seen of them, and really shows just how he was able to move away from his TV persona. Even though this is from a TV show, Take My Hand was used prominently in a TV show. Early on, it was just so much more enmeshed, and that changed, that evolved with time.
It was a bit gimmicky early.
Yes.
Good word for it.
Exactly. So the Snuffbox live loop transitions us very nicely into Catch Me in Time. This is interesting in that it's, I think, the first song we've ever reviewed or discussed that's not technically Matt's song. It's a cover of Theme from Snuffbox, but it's performed by a soul singer named Gino Washington.
Matt was interviewed for Hi-Fi Plus on November 21st, 2021. They asked him, one of the rarities you included on the box set is a song called Catch Me in Time, which features U.S. soul legend Gino Washington. How did that collaboration come about? And he said, I can't really remember. We had the same manager for a while, and I'd written the song, which was used in a TV show called Snuffbox. He's got a fantastic voice, and I just wanted to see what he would make of it. And they said, the song sounds like a Northern Soul floor filler, doesn't it? He said, yes, I'm a big fan of Northern Soul, so I suppose that was the motivation, but also to get Gino on it.
Gino is a fascinating guy. He, in addition to being a soul singer, is an author. He wrote kind of war novel and some children's books. He is a hypnotist and a member of the Guild of Hypnotists. And he appeared alongside Matt in a bit of Tom Jones, which was a not particularly good movie Matt appeared in back in 2009.
You're being really generous about that.
I can't be in love with this plastic. To live on my own just seems tragic. I don't mean it cause no big deal. I just want something that's real.
basically he took the existing snuff box and he transformed it into an upbeat retro. It's very retro sounding, which I think is super cool. A retro sounding funk / soul track. So I think it's really interesting what it became. I really love the instrumental towards the end with it's kind of a perpetual beat, and then there's an organ playing in the background, which sounds so cool.
I can't listen to this song very much. I don't know why. It bothers me. I don't know. It's just, some songs just like get on your nerves. And this is like one of those songs, and I hate to say it because I know that this probably meant so much to Matt to work with Geno Washington, and it was a big deal for him. And it's great to see like songs reimagined. I really love that, but something irks me about this song.
I like that though. It is a reimagining of the Snuffbox theme. I think that's exactly what it is. But if you're not into that type of music, then I can understand you not liking it.
The Northern Soul influence is very strong, and kind of like Jesse was saying, either that's your thing or it's not. Nothing wrong with it. It's definitely Matt's thing. It seems like in every interview he does, a lot of music magazines, websites love to ask, okay, what are your favorite songs? What are your favorite albums? What are your influences? And I just eat those articles up. I'll put out a plug here that I have put together a playlist of all the songs Matt has recommended in interviews over the years, and that is available on our Spotify.
It's on Spotify. We have a link to the playlist on our link in bio, but we always add to it whenever there's a new interview or something comes out and he mentions something new. We always add to the playlist, so it's always evolving. It's a very good playlist, very eclectic.
It is, and kind of feels cohesive at the same time. But back to Catch Me in Time. Very Northern Soul, has that driving beat, sped up tempo from the original. Tara, kind of what you spoke to, the vocals are very straightforward. There's not a lot of embellishment here. You hear a backing singer come in around 141, and that's about all the embellishment we get. There's not a lot of flourishes. Geno does not oversell the chorus, which is a really interesting take on the song, as you both said. The lyrics are similar to what Matt would use live. He would change the lyrics on the verses to, I don't want to cause no big deal. I just want something that's real. I believe that's what Geno sings as well. But I love the lyrics to the original. For those of you who have been with us since the start, back on the live album, we kind of picked them apart. And to me, this song is about being trapped in self-destructive cycles. There's that line again about, if I see you again back in detox, put my remains in my stuff box. Geno doesn't use that line. So it just loses a lot of the meaning and the nuance to me. It's cool hearing Matt's songwriting with the simps and the ornamentation removed. It still holds up, but I just think the original works a little better.
There's two things that I think make a good cover. You either keep it as the original and redo it with maybe your own tiny flair, or you completely reimagine it and make it into something new. And that's what Geno Washington did on this one, and I think it is a really cool cover. I mean, Northern Soul is not my number one genre of music to listen to, but I do like it, and I like what he did with it.
I like that it exists.
So moving on to Dark Beach, this is another one from the MySpace EP from 2010. This is one of my favorite pieces of Matt's music, just in general. I listen to it quite a bit. And as a Florida native, I'm really familiar with the Dark Beach. I'm familiar with being caught out on the boat when a sudden Florida thunderstorm pops up, which is quite frequently. But this gives me the exact feeling of a storm brewing offshore. In my head, I can see storm clouds building. You can feel the breeze pick up. You can smell the rain in the air. The temperature drops. And it's such an amazing sensation to experience. And this song really makes me feel that same sensation. The other thing that it reminds me of is the version of Poldark, which was out a few years ago starring Aidan Turner. It was on BBC. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it is such a good series. It was
I
on
haven't.
PBS Masterpiece here. PBS reshowed it. It's so good. Like, so good. But it's set in Cornwall, and they spend a lot of time on the cliffs in Cornwall, like looking over the sea. Like the sea is like a big part of the show, of the series. I could picture the song playing in the background of one of those melancholy dramatic scenes when they're kind of like looking over the sea. I don't know how he did it, but it really fits the mood of a dark, stormy beach, and I love it so much.
It is a wonderful song. It is so good. I this whole Summer Sun EP, I wish it was a physical copy because I would need to have it. And the you know, if you've ever seen the painting that he uses for the cover, it's really good. Like, it's just all kind of just quite a vibe. And this is probably a stupid question, but like, he uses so many different musical instruments in here, like there's xylophone, flute. Is it actually those things, or is it electronic?
I have a hard time telling with Matt's stuff a lot of the time.
Okay.
And since he did this,
especially this early stuff.
Right, I was going to say, since he did this so early, I can't imagine that he had actual musicians with him.
Yeah.
It's probably some sort of a synth reproduction, but there's no credits or anything, so we have no idea.
Okay, because I've listened to this song so many times, and it just occurred to me the other day. I was like, are they actually like playing the flute, or like, because I can't picture Matt on the xylophone, but I can picture him on his little synth.
He does use the xylophone and the glockenspiel, at least on the Blue Elephant, and I'm sure on other albums too. I just can't remember them offhand, but we know that he plays them.
So he could have been playing them back in 2010 or maybe earlier, whenever he recorded this. So
yeah, but I don't think he does any woodwinds though. Like, I don't think he plays the flute or the clarinet. I mean, Cecilia plays the clarinet. I can't remember if there's any clarinet sounding instrument in here. I mean, it would have been possible that, I don't know if she plays the flute too. A lot of people that play woodwinds play multiple woodwinds, but I don't know.
There's an old interview from around the Witch Hazel release where he talks about, they ask him like his next endeavors, and he talks about how he's wanting to learn the clarinet so he can play on his albums. I don't think that ever happened, probably in part because he has Cecilia, and so why would he need to?
Yeah. I played the clarinet in 6th and 7th and 8th grade, so I just want to throw that out there. I
love to throw that out there.
The clarinet. I played it very badly, but I played it.
I could at one point play Hot Cross Buns on the recorder. That's as far as I ever got.
Nice. I think I mastered Mary Had a Little Lamb on the recorder. That was about
it was Mary Had a Little Lamb. Yeah.
So glad that I'm all for arts education, but that one has not served me well in my adult life. For me, it actually, I definitely agree that it sounds like a soundtrack. It reminded me of spaghetti westerns, like Ennio Morricone, the Fistful of Dollars. There's also a little bit of a Celtic influence in there, but yeah, definitely a spaghetti western feel. I could have sworn that Matt has mentioned Ennio Morricone as an influence at some point, but when I went back and did a search, nothing came up. So that might be an association that exists in my mind. I'm not in love with this song as much as both of you are, but I would agree that it's the strongest of the unused instrumentals on the album. It's hypnotic without being too repetitive. It really paints a picture of a scene, like you discussed, Jesse. It feels foreboding. It has the keyboard adds some texture. It's not quite as much of a sketch as some of the other instrumentals, but it's also not essential for me by any means.
If I hadn't had those exact experiences and lived it, I don't know if that would have had the same effect on me, but because I did, I think it really resonates with me a lot. I think that's why I like it so much. Moving on to The Hangman, which is the acoustic version from 2007. This is not the track from Opium. This is from Snuffbox. This is when I was saying before, I thought this was on the soundtrack that came with the Snuffbox DVD, but it's not. It's the original version and also the live version that are on that CD. So it's kind of funny that we both thought that the other thing, I didn't even think about the Snuffbox loop. I thought about this being on the CD, but it's not.
There is a full-length live version, like you mentioned, from Bristol.
I couldn't sleep at nights then. woken by the faces of 1,000 dead men. What kind of beast kills for pay? I knew I'd go to hell on Judgment Day, but why should I be so sad? The hours are good and the money's not bad. I think of all the jobs that I could have gone into, sweeping up parks, driving trains to Waterloo. I could have been a painter or the world's greatest wit. I could have been a sailor, but the hat didn't fit. I'm a hangman. Take my hand, come with me. It's okay. You'll be free as a bird.
Like, this is one of those tricky songs. You know, it's from a TV show, so you can't really, I don't think I can judge it on its own. But what I do like about it is that, you know, Snuffbox was an obvious comedy, and he still inserted some of his own views into the lyrics of this. You know, in Snuffbox, that was his job. He and Rich Fulcher were hangmen. Matt's like really against the death penalty. And I think it's interesting always that when you listen to the lyrics, they're really a lot deeper than they appear on the surface. Like the line, "What kind of beast kills for pain?" I think that Snuffbox, but this song in general, it's really smart. And it's just kind of basically the darkest form of black humor. It's not something I'm going to listen to, but it serves a purpose, I think.
I actually do listen to this song in regular rotation, more than a lot of tracks on this bonus or this rarities disc. This was, I should note, used as one of the promo singles to promote Gather Up. I believe it was the last of 3 promo singles. I remember at the time thinking that was interesting since it does predate acid jazz.
Why do I not remember any of these promo singles? I don't remember any of them.
I don't either.
I don't know why that lodges in my brain. I could tell you the promo singles for like every song since I've been a fan of,
That's so
or every
funny.
album since I've been a fan of Matt's. And
the ones from the Blue Elephant, but I don't remember anything from Gather Up. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Continue.
I think it was the Take My Hand on Absolute Radio, then Blue Elephant Trip 2, and then this. I think that was the order. I might disagree with you a little in that I do think this stands outside of Snuffbox as a song and as a character sketch. As you said, this really blends comedy and pathos, which Matt is really good at.
Mhm.
He's spoken about this a little bit in interviews, but his best TV work certainly has this undercurrent of sadness. It's comedy, and sometimes it's very goofy comedy, but there's always kind of a slight melancholy to it. I think that's very much true here, and in a lot of Snuffbox. I would call this the catchiest track on this rarities disc. The songwriting is really solid. It gets stuck in my head a lot. It's just a tight little song. It's straightforward. Not a whole lot to say about the instrumentation. Matt provides his own backing vocals, which is interesting. And I'm assuming this is just predating the relationship or the partnership with Cecilia. The biggest question I have about this is what the purpose of this track was. Since it's not on that Snuffbox bonus CD, it predates acid jazz. What was this recorded for? Was it just a working demo for the show, or was this just for his own personal use to kind of pull out later on?
He sang this a couple of times live, the acoustic version.
Yeah.
I wonder if this was from one of those Snuffbox tour things that they did. Although I don't think that was 2007. I feel like it was later than that. Or he did a show at Rough Trade also, right around the time that, no, because that would have been later too. I don't know, from
And
2000.
that Rough Trade show,
That
I
was
think
like
was
Witch Hazel.
Take My Hand, Rosie. Yeah, it was all Witch Hazel
I
stuff.
thought he sang this one too, but I definitely could be wrong. Unless he did it, but that wouldn't make sense. I don't know. This is from 2007. So this is well before Acid Jazz. This is well before Witch Hazel.
It's a couple of years before Witch Hazel, because we forget that Witch Hazel was first released in 2009
Oh yeah, that's
as
true.
an internet exclusive, which means he would have been recording it probably around this time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or a
That's
little
good
bit after.
question, because the date stamp doesn't really.
Well, we
That
can't
date.
trust these date stamps.
I
We'll
was
talk
gonna
more
say
about
we'll get
that.
into that a little bit more later, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
also very true. Although the other one, the one from the Jeff Lloyd show, Take My Hand, was accurate. This one, I don't know. I don't know where it came from. It would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. You guys really gave a very good review of it, but I really have been so appreciative of these like acoustic versions and the stripped back versions of it. It just showcases Matt's beautiful voice, and I enjoy it. I definitely don't have it on any playlists or anything like that, but it's a nice little song. And again, I just love acoustic songs like that.
So after The Hangman, second half of this disc gets a lot more into alternate themes of songs that ended up being used. Some of which, like Wonder Theme, are variations on what we actually hear on the album, and some are just completely different takes. So Wonder Theme became Something in My Eye, from Phantom Birds, of course. It carries the same core melody as Something in My Eye, but the instrumentation and the tone of the song are totally different. I'm sure everyone here knows the final song, right? It's very much kind of a statement piece for Phantom Birds, acoustic, uses that pedal steel guitar, has that Dylan-esque twanginess to it. Whereas this song feels like playing in a sandbox with the theme of the song, exploring different moods and different possibilities. The version that we hear on Phantom Birds is resigned, it's a breakup song. To me, this one sounds cheerful, even joyous. It reminds me a lot of Night Terrors. It hits the synth solo and goes into a much jazzy variation. And then it starts a variation on the theme with a syncopated piano, which reminds me a lot of the Blue Elephant title track. So definitely experimental. I imagine him recording this just kind of stumbling on a tune that he liked and figuring out what he was going to do with it. I do want to mention, around a minute 46 seconds, he says something that to me was indecipherable. He says, "This is," can't figure out what. So if anyone could figure that out.
I didn't hear any vocals
I'm
on
obsessed
it.
with it's very faint, but he definitely says something, and I can't leave those stones unturned. I have to know what he says.
That's funny. You took a lot of words out of my mouth, but first and foremost, why wasn't this on Phantom first?
Because it doesn't sound anything like the tracks on Phantom First. I mean, there's some variation there, but a lot of them are acoustic.
Yeah, I
on the
mean, I know it
harmonica.
doesn't.
This is
but
totally
I mean,
different.
being that this was ultimately used on Phantom Birds, it was just interesting to me that it didn't appear on Phantom first.
I thought that too.
Yeah.
I had the same thought.
The intro is different than Something in My Eye, but then the melody overall is the same. It's a really good example of him holding bits of music and recycling them or using them for something different. I don't know how long this had been kicking around until he ultimately used it for Phantom Birds, but he definitely had it there for some use. Halfway through it, it goes into a really brief psychedelic organ, which I think is what she mentioned as the syncopated piano. And then it sort of weaves out of in and out of the original melody. And I agree. I think this is something that could have taken a full psychedelic turn and ended up on the Blue Elephant. I think it interesting how it ended up on some Phantom Birds, but he could have turned it up a notch psychedelically and it could have fit in on the Blue Elephant. It's a really cool track. There's a little bit of everything. I almost wish it didn't have the same melody as Something in My Eye, because that's all I associate this melody with now. I wish it was kind of like its own piece of music, because I feel like I'm too familiar with Something in My Eye to really appreciate this for a separate track. But it is really great. It's interesting to see the evolution of it.
Definitely agree. I like Something in My Eye. I don't think it's one of the stronger tracks on Phantom Birds, and I kind of like this version a little better. Since I love psychedelic Matt, I really would have liked to see him develop this, even though it's cool what it became. It's interesting that you mentioned this kicking around for a while. There's an interview, I think it's called the Masterclass interview. It's actually Matt doing a Q&A with a music school from spring 2020. It's kind of early lockdown era. And one of the pieces of advice he gives this music class is to hold on to fragments, hold on to anything, even if you don't have a use for it at that point, because you never know when it will come back or be useful or when you can pull it for something else. And I think that's definitely what happened here.
I think it is too. And I think that's advice that maybe he was given and he's definitely followed it, because there's evidence of him doing that so many times, like with the music from Toast, and Take My Hand originated in Snuffbox and then became Take My Hand. So, that's excellent advice and definitely something that he does quite frequently.
So I agree with you guys completely. I do love Something in My Eye, but it would have been amazing to kind of, again, separate this song and to just make something new with it. This is one of the songs I really wish that he would kind of rework and redo, and I'd love to hear what he comes up with. And it's just so fascinating too to see his songs progress. I can't talk enough about it, how amazing it's been to just see the progression and where he edits things and changes things. And this is just I don't know, just a really great glimpse into that. But it could have been made into something different, I think, and I would have liked to have seen that.
I think it is problematic now. I would love to see what it could have become if he had gone full psychedelic with it. But at the same time, that melody is so ingrained in it that I would never be able to separate it regardless. It's always going to be Something in My Eye.
It's so interesting. And I'll say this when we get to the Music for Insomniacs track 2, right? Phantom Birds is his most direct album by far, right? It's the instrumentation stripped down. The lyrics are very personal. He's mentioned that it was written during a difficult time in his life, and you certainly hear that. And so I kind of just pictured him picking up an acoustic and futzing with it. And these aren't songs that I had necessarily thought about being sketches that he had held on to for a while. And part of that's, I'm sure there's an element of truth. Part of it's the marketing, right? Everyone likes the idea of this kind of Dylan-esque, heartfelt album that he just sat down with a guitar and wrote. But that obviously isn't quite the reality of it.
No, and I really think it's another level of where he's so good at what he does. I don't know how he works as far as composing music or whatever. I would love to know more about his process of how he does things. I mean, he probably couldn't even articulate his process. It just comes to him, but I think it's really cool that he's able to do that.
I definitely agree. The line on Music for Insomniac was always that he wrote it in the middle of the night when he couldn't sleep. He was going through this phase of bad insomnia and kept himself occupied by writing this album. And so I'd always conceptualized it pretty similarly, but we get 2 alternate themes and alternate versions from Music for Insomniacs. And so clearly there was a bit more tinkering and just a bit more developing that went into this album than maybe he disclosed at first.
The Music for Insomniac's alternate intro is the next track, and it starts off with the sound of church bells, which I actually really love. And there's some distant chanting sounds that come in. It's very repetitive and it's very tranquil. It sounds like something that you could meditate to. And the underlying repeating melody sounds a bit like the dawn, actually, to me.
Yeah, for sure. They would have been written not that far from each other, and he was definitely playing with some of those repetitive, almost tribal beats.
Like this. I find it just a pretty little song. The synth in it, again, he's just such a master with the synth. It all flows very well, and I don't think that it should necessarily replace the intros that were used, but he should make another Music for Insomniacs. I don't know, I know it's crazy for me to say because that I don't love instrumental, but I think that this is just a really perfect little song, and I listened to this one quite a lot, actually.
You know, Music for Insomniacs 4, the flip side of that is Lost Contact. And I think it's kind of interesting that they use the flip side as a completely different song, something with lyrics and everything. So it's a really great track. It's not Music for Insomniacs, though. It's interesting that they used that as the B-side rather than like this alternative intro or the Rejected theme that we'll talk about in a minute. I don't know. I mean, it's awesome that we have them now, so.
It's cool to see The Road Not Taken. We were chatting with one of our listeners, or I was chatting with one of our listeners about this on Discord not that long ago. And I remember saying that it has almost a liturgical feel. And it was one of those statements that as soon as you make it, you're like, huh, it does. It feels like attending Mass. It has that very heavy rhythm, of course, the church bells that you mentioned, some chiming bells that I think might be a xylophone. Couldn't quite tell. Even more than the final intro, this sounds like how Insomnia feels. Some of the adjectives I wrote during my last listen were dragging, heavy, plodding. It has that feeling of being in a haze when you're sort of half awake but just cannot fall asleep. I think it's really interesting, and I think that the intro that was ultimately used is a lot more dynamic, it's more melodic, and it's a better fit for the overall piece. But I would definitely agree, it's cool to see The Road Not Taken, and of course that's true for most of these tracks.
So the next song is the theme from Sorry. This goes back to 2007. So it just shows you how long, like TV themes didn't come out in 2000 until 2018. And he was obviously like doing this and performing this way, way, way back in the day.
Like you said, Tara, it's really cool, really fascinating to see how deep these influences go back in Matt's performing history. This is one where the video of the performance actually exists on YouTube.
I'll link it.
It comes right up if you Google Sorry live on Charlie Brooker. It was actually an end of the year show for Charlie Brooker's Screen Wipe, end of 2007. Ronnie Hazelhurst had passed away the previous year, so this was intended as a little bit of a tribute to him. And this is played straightforward. The version on Matt Berry and the Maypoles Live has a little bit of a reggae overtone, some reggae instrumentation in the percussion. This version has none of that. It's just a straightforward rendition. It's funky and it feels like it fits with Opium's funk influences, which were not too far in the rear view at this point. It's fun because it's a fun song, but works a lot better if you see the performance video. Matt's wearing his pilot's uniform that was kind of his go-to stage attire at the time, and his band some of them have face paint on, and it's
the drummer has full.
It's a lot of
face
fun.
paint. I really like this version of Sorry, and I thought I was kind of a little crazy thinking that his normal live version had a little bit of a reggae feel to it, but it totally does. This version just sounds really crisp and clean. You said it's more stripped back than the album version from the live album, so it seems a little cleaner. It's not as busy. I actually really like that they just took it straightforward. This is one of my favorite pieces of music from this Rarities album. Like, this predates acid jazz, it predates the Maypoles, and I do think Andy Vickery is in this band. It's hard to tell for sure. I think he's wearing a black wig.
This is from the days that he was performing with the Jonas 3, right? That was his backing band, and then they sort of evolved into the Maypoles, but it's very cloudy.
I think that Andy Vickery was with him from the very beginning. Andy Vickery is the guitar player, and then I think the other members, I want to say, were brothers. I don't even know if this is that band or if this is a different band, but yeah, it's cool to see Matt with his, like, not first original band, but like a part of an original band or something. But I think Andy is on the stage with them. Yeah, I don't know. I like it. I think this is a really cool version.
In the first shot, he's wearing these aviator sunglasses. He loves his
Yes.
aviator sunglasses. And then the
noticed
camera
that.
cuts and the sunglasses are gone.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah.
I was going to
Yeah.
actually mention that that may not have been done in one take.
No.
Because that's so funny.
Busted.
I mean, it's cool because he wasn't really known for music at that point. It
Yeah.
would have, I imagine, been a really big deal to him to perform live on a show like that.
I'm sure they were really nervous.
Next, I don't know why they didn't group the music for Insomniac's alternate intro and the rejected theme together,
I
but
know.
Yeah.
we kind of have a little bit of tone whiplash, mood whiplash, and we have the music for Insomniac's rejected theme. Uncharacteristically, I don't have much to say about this. It's kind of a big nothing of a song. It's just a few chords and synth. It feels a little like a lullaby. That
Yes.
feels like a stretch, but I had to say something.
No,
It's a sketch, and it's not as memorable as what was used.
it's almost too subdued for music for Insomniacs. But as far as sleeping goes, I would have preferred this to some of the jump scares that are actually in music for Insomniacs. Like, if I wanted to actually stay asleep, I would have liked this part of it much better.
I think he might have been asleep when he wrote it, because there's not a lot going on
No,
here.
there's not very much at all. It's really subdued, mellow.
I'm obsessed with this song. I love
Really?
it so much. I love
So
it.
funny.
Why? Why? Tell us why.
I don't know. It's just like you said, a lullaby. I like take it as that. It's like, I don't know. I find it like relaxing and soothing.
is.
And like, I agree with you completely. Like I said that, I was like, it would have been nicer because it's actually music
Right?
for Insomniac, like put you to sleep. But like,
Exactly.
I like that.
Exactly.
No, it's funny.
I don't want to like finally fall asleep and then be woken up because some guy is suddenly drowning.
Yeah, I gotta save him.
I love music for Insomniacs. I really love it, but no, I cannot. That does not help me sleep. It helps me
No.
focus. I will listen
No.
to it all the time if I need to focus on something, but it does not put my head into a place to sleep. Not with jump scares. That doesn't work. This would have been better.
Yeah. Okay. I just I like I'd give this song like a 10 out of 10.
That's
I love it.
That's
Wow.
so funny.
I know. So you guys are like saying this, and I'm like, oh my god,
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
it's
No.
so good. It's on my it's always on my like liked songs list, and I always like go through. Yeah, no, I listen to this song a lot, like when I'm just like focusing at work and stuff, and I don't know, it's just like relaxing.
It
I like
is.
I like all of it. I like the two outtakes, the alternative intro that we already talked about, and this one. Like I really, again, it's very surprising for me because I'm very big on lyrics, but I really, really enjoy this one.
It's also really short, so it probably held your attention.
That's it. That's it.
You're
It
like,
just
oh,
was
it's
so-
instrumental, and it's really short. I love
And
this
it's
one.
really short. This is the
So-
best one.
So funny.
You know what it brings to mind a little bit, and this just came to me, so might be bullshit, might not. But Matt has named as an influence in quite a few of those articles where he's asked to name his favorite musicians. One of the left field picks that he consistently names is Eric Satie. I'm sure I'm mangling that, Tara, as a kind of French speaker. You can tell me if I'm off base there. But he was a French composer and pianist. What I've heard of his stuff, it's very minimalist. And this isn't a piano piece, but we know that Matt does appreciate some minimalism, and maybe that influence is at play here. I'm reaching,
But
but
it could also be like he's a big fan of Brian Eno, and if you listen to
Mhm.
Brian Eno's ambient music, which I love, it's not far off from that either. It's because that's very, very tranquil and very soothing.
do y'all remember there's like a guy named Nils Fromm or something, who does a piece called In the Sky and on the Ground. And it's less than a minute long. It's 51 seconds long, and there's almost nothing to it. He put it as the opening track on his playlist he did a few years ago for Virgin Atlantic Airlines. We know that he has an appreciation for this stuff, and maybe that was part of his thought process in developing this.
That track seems to have come out maybe right around the same time or right before Music for Insomniacs would have been written, so it's very possible that that was an influence.
And if you want to hear what we're talking about, I'll put out another plug for our Spotify playlist.
Moving on to Walk with Samuel, which became Devil Inside Me.
I was a lonely sheep, but now I walk with Samuel. I've hooves where I had feet, no horns or tail that dangles. I could not bring my wife, for I was not allowed to. I live another's life, but what to say to you? Hello, yes, I'm not too sure who I'm meant to be. Did you want the priest or the adversary? I blow your mind when I'm wrong. High to fall back down again, it's true. You remember we met at the old Goose Fair. I hate to admit that I was never there, but I blow your mind when I'm wrong. High to fall back down again, wrong. High to fall back down again.
I have some questions about this track. The lyrics literally sound like he has become the devil. He says, I was a lonely sheep, but now I walk with Samuel. I've hooves where I had feet, no horns nor tail that dangles. So I did some research on this because I am not versed in biblical references whatsoever. And according to Britannica.com, there is a biblical character called Samael, which is spelled Samael. And he is the king of all demons, the angel of death, the husband of the demonic Lilith, and the arch enemy of Michael, the archangel, and of Israel. I don't know if this is maybe who he was trying to reference in the song, but he spelled it Samuel like the traditional way, Samuel, rather than Samael. So I don't know. That would be really interesting to find out. The melody and the lyrics and the chorus are the exact same as Devil Inside Me, I'm pretty sure. But the lyrics are really, really dark, the parts that aren't Devil Inside Me. So it's a bit drolling until it gets to the chorus where it picks up a bit and then it drolls a bit again.
What do you mean when you say drolls?
Drolls like it's slow, dragging. Dragging. I don't know.
Interesting. No, I don't get that, but it's a good word. So Devil Inside Me was kind of built from a combination of this track and You That I See, which is another demo originally packaged with the Kill the Wolf box set and later, more recently, included on the 10th anniversary edition. Unpopular opinion probably, but I would have preferred to keep these as two separate songs. I actually like both of these demos more than the final version, and I like the final version, but this really leans hard into those folklore influences, the religious kind of Catholic overtones that you spoke to, and it genuinely feels eerie to me, especially on the verses. I did not get drolling, which is why I was interested to hear.
I don't think that's actually a word that exists outside of my head, but
Shakespeare made up his own words. Why can't we?
Okay, I've made up the word. I'll try to think of a definition that
Rolling.
fits to anybody except for myself.
Dragging, slow.
Yeah, like dragging. It drags. That's what I was trying to say.
It's not a perfect song. To me, the chorus and the verse feel a little disjointed. I always cringe a little when he rhymes Samuel with dangles. It's not a rhyme. It doesn't work.
That's something that continuously bugs you. Cracks me up.
It does. I'm not saying what he should have rhymed because they don't pay me to do this.
Nope.
But on the whole, the song is kind of more than the sum of its parts to me, and really exemplifies a lot of what he was doing at that point with those British countryside folklore influences. It kind of surpasses the original for me. I really love this.
What you said about the melody and the lyrics being disjointed, I think that's how I feel it is. It doesn't seem to connect well.
Yeah, I think disjointed is a very good word to use to describe it. And don't like it. I had a hard time kind of coming up with anything even to say about this song because I don't like this version. It's again, I love to see the other versions of stuff and see where he's going with. I found this one really hard to get through. Samuel, I didn't look into it. I realize right now I should have, but I was raised Catholic, and I thought Samuel was like a demon, and I thought that was kind of canon that Samuel was a demon that would tempt people. So
there's Samuel in the Old Testament. Like, I was aware of Samuel. Samuel is a good guy. Samael was the demon.
Okay. See, I got it all.
They're spelled exactly the same, except for instead of Samuel, it's Samael. So that's why I was wondering, like, the song fits more with Samael than it does with Samuel, because I couldn't get it to fit with actual biblical Samuel at all, but it does fit with Samael. So I don't know if it was a misspelling or if he meant to do that or if that was even who he was referencing.
Yeah.
But
could you making it up? Just he didn't like a guy named Samuel, or I don't know.
Maybe he took
Matt's always played a little fast and loose with the biblical imagery.
Yeah, maybe he took a literal walk with a guy named Samuel, and this was all something that occurred during that walk.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't hate the song. I don't dislike it. I just I think Devil Inside Me, works a lot better.
It is interesting to note that this is, I believe, the only track on the Rarities disc that shows up elsewhere. It's also on the Wolf demos. And I don't know if we'll cover the Wolf demos. It's kind of TBD, I guess. But they're a fascinating listen just to hear how those songs and song fragments evolved into the album we hear.
Yeah.
So next we have Blankety Blank. And I think Courtney, you had a really good list of all the names he was saying in this.
Yeah, she did. I just picked out the people that I recognized. That's all. Yeah. I didn't know any of the other people. This is just the vocal intro from Blankety Blank.
I went down a little bit of a Google Wikipedia hole. It's an incomplete list because there's probably about 7 or 8 names that I might have been mishearing, or even if I don't think I was mishearing, I just couldn't find a public analog. So maybe they're friends of Matt's, relatives of Matt's. There's also a handful of people where I found public figures with the same name, but I'm not sure if they're the right person. For example, Henry Cooper is a boxer. I've never heard Matt mention any interest in boxing, so don't know if that's the right guy. But about 2/3 of these names I was able to connect with, mostly entertainers, television presenters, actors and actresses, mostly from the 70s.
And appearing tonight on Lenny Bennett, Isla Sinclair, Lindsay DePaul, Kenny Lynch, Roy Hudd, Lisa Goddard, St. Etienne, Lorraine Chase, Kenny Everett, Beryl Reed, Sally James, David Arnold, Keith Barron, Wendy Richards, Pat Coombs, Hogwash, Roy Kinnear, Barry Cryer, Henry Cooper, Mark Morris, Tom O'Connor, Thora Hurd, Derek Nimmo, Andy Lewis, Les Dennis, Matt Berry, Jeff Cates, June Whitfield, Vicky Michelle, David Holmes, Derek Griffiths, and the Maypoles. And here's your host, Don.
These were people that I'm assuming Matt grew up seeing on TV. I won't go through the list because there's a lot of them. And if you're already with us at this point, as Matt would say, bless you. But we were thinking we might post something on social media a little later on, just listing all the names we could track down. The takeaway is these are people from Matt's formative years. A lot of them were frequent guests on Blankety Blank during that period. And a lot of them are people who I'm guessing influenced his comedy career, which is always drawn very heavily on the 70s imagery. Like you mentioned, Jesse, there are some names interspersed for people we know and love, right? Pugwash, the Maypoles, David Holmes. He even gives himself a shout out at one point. I was surprised that Vic and Bob weren't on this list, seeing that he has named them over and over as probably his biggest comedy influences. Maybe they just didn't fit in with the time period, with the era, but it is cool to just kind of pick this apart. There are a few children's TV show hosts. If you're really looking for a deep dive, it's a fun hour to spend on Wikipedia.
I picked out only the names of the people that I recognized. I kind of assumed that the other people were either made up or toast names or like his personal friends, family, stuff like that. But once you mentioned that a lot of people were former game show hosts and stuff like that, it made me think that maybe he picked out people that were just regulars on game shows. Like here, in the old-timey game shows where they had celebrity guests, there were certain actors and comedians and stuff that were always in the panels. Like Richard Dawson from Family Feud was always on those old panels, like Gene Rayburn, and there was just like certain celebrities that were always there. And I'm wondering if maybe he picked some of those out too to put in this to make it feel more authentic. So they may not have been necessarily like influences of his, but people that were maybe fixtures on those shows at that time.
No, definitely. Now, as a piece of music, this is still Blankety Blank, and I hate Blankety Blank with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. And so this is absolutely awful to me. Would never play it intentionally outside of research for this podcast, but I appreciate the nods to his influences.
If I never have to hear this song again, I'd be so happy. I listened to it, like, again, you gotta listen to it. We're doing the research, and I was just trying to, like, catch the names, and I just, at one point, I was like, I have to stop. It is so grating. And I had that freaking song, like, just blankety blank. Oh my god, I had it in my head for days, and I'm hoping now that we're done with this, it can go back to like never being in my head again.
I was just gonna say that. Ugh. The good news is, unless for whatever reason there is a new compilation at some point in the future and blankety blank happens to appear on it, we never have to talk about it again. We never have to listen to it again. It is done. It is interpret.
I get that it's a beloved piece of British pop culture, and I apologize for all of our UK listeners who are probably aghast, but it doesn't all translate. Can't be the Beatles.
Not at all.
And they're not all winners.
Yeah.
So the next song is The Blue Elephant Trip 2. And I love this song. It is just so fantastic. It's so cool. That's the word. Cool. I don't know that it fits on the album. I think that it was the right choice probably to not include it, but it needs to be on. I picture it as a deep space horror thriller movie soundtrack. It's just like it's high energy, and it's like kind of like a little bit like creepy, and this is a fantastic song. I listen to this all the time, and I'm obsessed with it, and I'm just so glad that we got to like hear it, and I'm so glad that it was included on this because we never would have, like, I don't know, I don't want to call it a masterpiece. I'm not going to use that word, but it's like, it's a 10 out of 10 for me, and I'm glad that we got to listen to it. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Acid Jazz.
I think it's so cool too, especially if you listen to it with headphones on, because there's so many different sounds coming in and out of each channel of your headphones, and it's all moving around, so it just feels like a really immersive experience. It sounds too modern to have been on the Blue Elephant. It doesn't fit on there. The Blue Elephant had that real retro feel to it. This sounds very futuristic. It actually kind of reminds me of Muse. There's that constant really deep bass, and then it just sort of a ton of stuff slowly build on top of it. I think if I had heard it separate for myself, I would have thought, is this a Muse track? Because that's what it reminded me of. I always wondered if he likes Muse too. It seems like something that would be sort of in his wheelhouse. But yeah, I agree. I definitely don't think it belonged on the Blue Elephant, but I'm really, really glad it exists.
I think you both nailed it. Took some of the words out of my mouth. I agree that it's a little incongruous with the guitars and the organ and the just kind of retro 70s psychedelic feel on the rest of the album. I think this is an analog to the Blue Elephant title track, which is the first track on the B-side, and it doesn't have the slow build of that album piece. It starts out of the gate and keeps going. It's pulsating. I always think of ray guns. Maybe it's a little cliche, but it just has that, like you said, Tara, that kind of sci-fi feel almost with an ominous bass line. It definitely pulls in from some of Matt's more out there influences, like Clark, who he covers on the live disc we'll get to in a few minutes. Pulls less from that jazzy, proggy feel that really defines the rest of the album. So doesn't really fit, but it is a cool piece of its own right.
Yep, absolutely. Moving on to Sweet Velvet, this became Seasons on Fire. And this is really just the instrumental version of Season on Fire. This is a track that I mentioned when we were talking before about what a great composer he is. It's when you strip back the songs and you take the lyrics off, even though the lyrics are really beautiful, it's songs like this where I feel like he's really underrated as a composer, and the instrumental is just really, really beautiful.
Totally agree. I was a little surprised by the inclusion of this track, not because it's not great, it is, but it's really more of a backing track than a demo. It's very similar to the final version. When I listen side by side, I think the album version adds a folk kind of acoustic guitar and the drums are heavier, and those are the only differences I could find.
It may just be too because he recorded this one on his own and the album version was recorded with the full band, so that could be why.
Yeah, it's hard to say anything about this. It's Seasons on Fire without the singing, and I didn't notice any differences, but yeah, I'm sure you're right.
I'd like to know why it's called Sweet Velvet.
Yeah, I like exactly.
That's so funny. You both said that at the exact same time. Yeah, where did Sweet Velvet come from? I don't know. I like Seasons on Fire. That's one of my favorite song titles of his. So we've reached the final track of the Rarities and Unreleased disc. This is The Blue Elephant, the alternative intro. We actually have a quote about this.
Matt did an interview with Super Deluxe Edition in November 12th, 2021, and they asked him, "It's very interesting listening to the Blue Elephant alternative intro that's on one of the discs in this box set compared to a board, which became the finished version. A board has a lighter, jazzier touch, and the original version had a slightly heavier guitar and a whole different feel. That's quite an interesting insight into your decision-making process at the time."
Matt replied, "Yeah. I mean, you've just got to balance stuff, you know? It's just a sequencing thing. Because the thing about that album is, it was designed just to be listened to in one go, rather than odd tracks, because they dovetail into one another. So you've got to take these things into account when you're putting one track in front of another."
myself. I can safely say that I'm not a fan of this. I love the intro to The Blue Elephant. I keep wanting to, when I listen to this, I keep wanting to hear that cha-chung from Aboard, and it's not there. You don't hear it. This is much more subdued. I kind of feel like it's a little bit whiny. There aren't any drums in the first part of it, other than what sounds like an occasional, maybe a timpani and a bass drum. I don't know if that's what it is that makes it feel like it's lacking a little bit. Once the drums actually do kick in about 2/3 of the way in, it's better, but it's kind of short-lived. So ultimately, super glad he scratched this version.
I am too. I do think it's fascinating as kind of what could have been moment. It's definitely more of a statement of purpose for the album, which is interesting. Like, it has that distorted guitar that comes in around 48 seconds, and that's, of course, all over the final album. But again, me and my overtures, the version of Aboard that he ended up finally using feels like an overture. I'm pretty sure I said that when we discussed The Blue Elephant, and I do think that was an intentional choice. Totally get what he's talking about with sequencing in that interview quote. Even though this is actually closer to what the rest of the album sounds like, the version of Aboard on the final album provides a really stark contrast with Summer Sun, the track right after it. And that contrast is kind of what makes it work.
I completely agree with you guys. Like, I do like this, though. Like, I do like this song, but it was not the choice for the album. 100% Aboard was the better choice. So again, a good look into his editing, and he's a friggin' good composer.
He's good at album sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
And that quote, it's not something he talks about a ton, but that quote really gives insight into how he thinks about it. That's something I know we've beaten into the ground in every album we've reviewed, but it really comes to the forefront here that he's very thoughtful about the order in which he puts songs, the way songs flow into each other.
Right.
And I think The Blue Elephant is kind of his masterwork in that regard.
There's separate things that make him so great. And I touched on this earlier. Lots of people play multiple instruments. Lots of people are self-taught. Lots of people can play by ear. But the fact that he can put all of these other pieces along with it, the sequencing, the song orders, what flows, what can he ducktail in between, to make a cohesive piece of music. That's what I think is where his true genius lies and what makes him so great. It's sort of that intangible thing that's like everything all together all at once. And, because lots of people can do these individual things, but he does them all, and he does them all so well. I feel like he should get a lot more credit than he does. It seems like he's starting to build a lot more of a more broad audience and fan base. I hope that we can contribute to that in some way, because he really deserves so much credit for what he does.
It's not a coincidence that we've chosen to structure this podcast the way we have over the past couple of years, because it's been over 2 years. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is crazy.
I digress.
Yeah, you're right. Like that, it was not a coincidence. The reason why we started from the beginning and we've worked our way through the perfect progression of where he started and where he is now. He's just improved and improved and improved, and he's evolved as a musician. And it's really like he's done it before our ears, like you can actually hear his progression, and I think that's really special, and this is the culmination of it. I think it's cool.
I would agree, and that brings us to the end of rarities and unreleased. So that leaves live at a festival.
Per the Acid Jazz press release, Live at a Festival features 5 songs recorded over 3 festivals in 2015, including the Green Man Festival in the Brecon Beacons, backed by his exceptional band The Maypoles, featuring the Blue Tones, Mark Morris, on guitar. Barry and his well-drilled band deliver a stonking and urgent folk psych-driven set, including the storming opener of Kill the Wolf's Medicine into a heavy, fuzzy version of Witch Hazel's solo. Stonking is not a word I was familiar with.
No!
I'm sure that I didn't copy and paste that wrong. They did indeed say stonking. This record was actually mixed and edited by Phil Scraggs.
According to the Oxford English Dictionary, stonking is used to emphasize something remarkable, exciting, or very large.
We're going to set the record straight on Live at a Festival. So, first and foremost, the record sleeve. The record sleeve features an absolutely beautiful picture of Cecilia Phage wearing a pink hooded cloak, holding a bouquet of blue hydrangeas with a big bonfire burning behind her. On the back of the sleeve, if you flip it over, this photo is credited to Ben Meadows. And as much as we love Ben, it is time to right a wrong. Ben Meadows did not take this photo.
Gasp.
Gasp. This photo of Cecilia Phage on the sleeve of Live of a Festival was taken by James Sedge at the Lunar Festival in June of 2016. Yes.
Didn't James originally post this on social media, on Instagram or Facebook or both?
I don't know. I don't know if James posted it, but I know Cecilia posted it, and she credited it to James. So I did reach out to James. I just wanted to confirm 100% before I make a complete idiot out of myself that he did take these pictures, and he did. He took these photos. So credit is where credit is due to James Sedge for taking a beautiful picture. And James is actually a really good photographer. I don't know if you've ever looked at his social media, but he does take quite beautiful pictures. So also, I mentioned this was taken at the Lunar Festival in 2016. Speaking of the Lunar Festival, the press release from Acid Jazz states that these recordings were from 3 festivals in 2015. So after an exhausting 5 minutes of research, it appears that Matt has only ever played at 3 festivals. The aforementioned Lunar Festival, which was in June of 2016, the Witchwood Festival, which was also in 2016, and the Green Man Festival, which was in 2013.
Oh my god.
So I don't know if they just took an average and came up with 2015, or I don't know. But none of these recordings were from 2015. That is the end of my rant.
Oh my god.
But I wanted to make sure, I mean, when you have your photo on the cover of an album sleeve, you want to make sure that you get the right photographer in there. And James deserves the credit for that. And we'll post the original photo too and show the evolution of how it became the album sleeve.
It is such a good photo. Good job, James.
Good job.
It just evokes everything Matt's about in his music.
Yes. And I love that it's also not a picture of Matt. Not that I don't love seeing pictures of Matt. I love that it's a photo of Cecilia, which is super cool.
Now that we've set the record straight, let us proceed with Live at a Festival. Matt spoke to this disc a little bit in an interview of We Are Cult, promoting Gather Up on October 23rd, 2021. The interviewer noted, "It also sounds like you really enjoy yourself on the live stuff with the Maypoles that's included in Gather Up." And Matt replied, "It's always good fun. Playing live is always worth doing. It keeps your interest in the songs. There's just that sort of contact. They're alive once they've been played live, if you know what I mean. Otherwise, everything is just sort of studio projects, and I never really wanted that. I always wanted to bring the songs to life, as it were." Interesting, given that was a quote from just a few years ago. As we know, Matt hasn't toured in, 6 years?
I was just going to say, can somebody please print this off and text it to Matt, or remind him that you used to like performing songs live?
Yeah.
And, we'd also like to see you performing songs live. Just a thought. Anybody that's listening that has access, just a thought.
I think Matt is well aware that people want to see him perform live, and I get it. He's got a packed schedule. There's a lot of logistics. I'm a true believer. I think he'll perform, if not tour again, I think he'll do shows again, but we'll see. We had kind of discussed how we wanted to handle this album. We definitely wanted to cover it, but 3 of the 5 tracks on here are very similar to tracks on his live album. Those are going to be Theme from Snuffbox, Solstice, and The Pheasant. So we're not going to talk as specifically about those, just because playing them side by side, they really are similar. So we'll give an overall impression, but we did want to speak to the 2 tracks that are more unique to this album, and those are a medley of Medicine and Solo, and then a cover of Clark's Silver Sun. So what do y'all think about this Medicine solo performance?
I think the music itself is really nice and crisp and clear, but the vocals to me sound really muffled and drowned out by the music from the band, which is sort of a shame because I think it's otherwise a good live recording. I think that Phil probably had to do a lot of work to get some of these recordings to sound as good as they actually are because they are taken at festivals. I don't know if if it's my imagination, but can't tell if the tempo seems a bit faster in Medicine to just like ease
It
the
definitely
transition.
is.
Yeah.
To like
definitely
ease
sped
the transition into solo. Okay, so that wasn't my imagination.
Hey! Lulu Festival. And of course, Monroe.
The solo part too, it just overall sounds too loud in parts and even shoutier than usual. But I have to give all of the props to Andy Vickery's guitar solo because he's amazing. You know, I keep thinking we really should ask him to come on to the show to talk to us, but it would literally just be like an hour of me telling how amazing he is over and over.
I'm sure he'd love that.
That would be it. So if you guys can come up with some like intelligent questions, maybe we'll ask him, but I don't know if that would be particularly interesting to anybody else, just me telling him how amazing he is.
I think he'd appreciate that though, Jesse.
He might appreciate it. I could like,
wouldn't?
probably
Yeah.
send him a message and be like, hey, by the way, you're amazing. Just want to let you know that today.
Come on the podcast and I'm just gonna like hype you up the whole time.
I'll praise
Hey,
you.
Andy, if you're listening, drop us a line. 'Cause I know
Yeah.
you might be.
He follows us on Instagram, so.
I kind of love this song for all the reasons I think you don't. And I think that might just kind of come down to our taste in music. I know that
Yes.
you're more into the proggy stuff than I am. You're more into the folky stuff than I am. I love that, but I also like a lot of garagey stuff and punk stuff. This is not punk, but it's the closest that Matt has ever gotten. He is worlds away from punk, but this is pure garage rock. It's kinetic. The vocals, like you mentioned, are sped up and almost shouted. There's this driving drum beat. Definitely James is showing off what he can do here. I think that Medicine is, without a doubt, an improvement on the original track, which, thinking back to our Kill the Wolf episode, I think we were all a little meh on Medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
None of us hate it, but none of us love it either. And this just has this great driving energy. It turns the simplicity of the original track into a strength. Definitely want to shout out that crunchy, distorted guitar solo around the minute mark. It
So
wraps
good.
up, and there's this dramatic transition
Mhm.
into the solo riff, which is just still one of the most purely catchy, visceral things Matt's ever written. I love everything about this. I love the vocal embellishment on the chorus. Matt adds these kind of soulful embellishments, lots of ooh yeahs that just build on the original track for me. And I love the fade out. You can hear him say, "This is good. This is good." He sounds like he's just letting loose. And as someone who doesn't always let loose easily, it's cool to hear.
He does. He seems like he's having a really good time when he's doing this. Like, again, Medicine, not our favorite. I think this is a good version of it. And the transition between Medicine and solo, it's so good. It is such a good transition. The song is a banger. Solo is just like, it is such a fun song. And to hear it live, it's amazing. I do only have just like a little thing that I wanted to mention is that like at the end, Matt just kind of starts chit-chatting. And I wish that they would have like let it go and kind of see what, you know, he's shooting the shit with the audience. I would have liked to have heard that more.
Yeah. I'd like to hear some of his banter in between songs.
Yes.
Yeah.
His banter.
I think you're right, Courtney, about how it kind of sounds sort of like a garage band. And I like punk, but garage band music is not really my jam. I don't like the shoutiness of it. I sound so old saying that. Like I sound like a boomer. Like
Too shouty.
It's too loud and shouty. But ultimately it's too loud and shouty.
Yeah. Fair.
Whereas I love the loudness and I love the shoutiness, and it feels perfect for the festival setting. This sounds like the sort of thing you would listen to in the middle of the field on a hot day. Now, to go to the polar opposite end of the spectrum, this leads into a cover of Silver Sun, which is a very experimental, very ambient Clark song. Matt has spoken about his fandom of Clark, and we touched on that way back in the Night Terrors episode, as some of you might recall.
Oh, I recall that. I recall that a lot. I recall that we all had the same reaction to that one.
We didn't. I liked it. Remember?
Oh, you did?
I
So
look
hard
on
to believe.
Jesse's face
Just
right
kidding.
now.
Never mind.
It's just, it's not even disgust so much as disapproval. It's just like,
Yeah.
I'm not even
it
angry.
was disgust.
I'm
It was
sad.
a bit of both. Yeah. It was kind of disgusting and disapproval.
What I had said is that it's not something I would ever seek out to listen to. It's not something I particularly liked as an aesthetic experience, but that I respected that he went there, and I respected that he branched out and it was experimental, and I respected that it had the audacity to exist.
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
yeah.
The audacity to
remember
exist.
that.
I'm sorry. I misremembered that as you disliking the song.
I remember that now very
That's
well.
not really a thumbs up.
I like that this version of Silver Sun has the audacity to exist.
Okay.
If you're going to kind of drop it now.
I had not actually thought to go seek out the original until I was prepping for this episode, and this actually kind of reins in the original. The original goes to some very experimental, very kind of discordant places, and this is actually, dare I say, a little bit more listenable. Still pretty out there for Matt and for the Maypoles. I wanted to ask y'all, speaking of stage banter, this track starts with Matt saying, if you're going to drop it now. Is that an acid reference? I'd always assumed that he's talking about acid there.
I mean, it would be, yeah.
What else would you drop?
I don't know. And if you're going to drop acid, this would be a really great track to do it to.
That's what I took
This
it as.
sounds like a nightmare to
It
take
would either
acid
be
to.
drop the acid or drop the beat. I don't know what else
Yeah.
it would be. Could be both.
We know that Matt loves the psychedelia, so there's a lot that goes with that. This has this nagging rhythmic backbeat throughout. We hear a wailing guitar solo, kind of a drawn out guitar solo for about 30 seconds. There's a trombone solo about 2 minutes in that kind of provides a melodic counterpart. This is definitely, it's not a jam, but it feels like a jam. And it's just slightly offbeat at the beginning, which to me adds to the charm. It sounds like this isn't something they've played a lot, but they're kind of doing something new, and they sort of find their sync as the track goes. We talked about wanting to hear more of the fade outs at the end, and you can just barely hear at the end of the track. Matt laughs and then says, "Fuck knows what that was."
Thank you very much. Fuck knows what that was.
Yeah, I love that. Clark is just generally not my cup of tea. The original sounds so noisy and it's just all over the place. It truly gives me a headache and I never want to listen to it again. The Maples version of it, though, I think is really great. I think they took this underlying buried melody and they brought it to the forefront. And I think that the track really benefits from having actual instruments playing it in addition to the synth. The original just seems to be, I think it's just completely electronic, but I could be wrong. But I think that Clark is generally electronic. I really love that you can hear that this was recorded in an outdoor space. You can hear that. I've seen videos of them playing this, but it's all just, sort of crappy cell phone recordings from back in the day. So it's really great to hear an actual really good recording. Phil did a really great job on this one. And yeah, Graham Mann's trombone just really elevates the entire thing. And they overall just sounded like they had a really fun time playing this one.
I just want to give a shout out to Graham Mann, who is, I think, in a lot of ways, the unsung hero of the Maypoles.
He kind of is,
How
yeah.
many bands have a trombonist, but he just adds so much texture, so much depth.
And
There's
he plays
so many songs.
Yeah, and he plays the
Yeah.
keyboards too.
Would not think of putting a trombone on this song, and it works so well.
It's so much better than the original, my god. So next one from there is theme from Snuffbox. And I thought, I don't have a whole lot to say about this. I just think that it's interesting that it's the spelling on the record is Snuffbox all one word, which is...
I saw that.
Yeah, for some reason. I don't know why they did that. I don't know if it was just a typo. And this is another one that you can really tell was recorded on an outdoor stage. It just sounds big. It sounds loud and crisp, and the vocals sound really, really great on this one. Also, it's over 8 minutes long. So I'm sure Tara lost interest about a quarter of the way through.
I didn't. I loved this. This is kind of like a little bit of frantic version of the song. The jamming was like really good. The bass and the drum solo, I was enthralled the whole time. I really, really loved it. Yeah, I know. Like the synth at the end, the whole thing. And then I don't know if you guys caught this, but the little riff from Cars by Gary Newman.
Gary Newman. He also brings in, and he usually does this when he plays Snuffbox, a little bit of The Empty Room from the TV show Snuffbox. It's like a little bit of an Easter egg.
Then we get into Solstice, and honestly, this is a live music masterclass. I don't have a whole lot to say about it other than it's just magnificent. And I like the synth part in the beginning. It's a little bit different than what they usually play. It's a little bit like, sounds spacier to me. Oh, and again, Annie Vickery's solo, unbelievable. Just amazing.
Virtuosic.
Yep.
I love that Matt kind of trips up on the lyrics at the very beginning of this song.
Yeah.
At least that's what I heard. He's
No, you're right. You're right.
He's singing along with Cecilia, as he usually does on this track, and she says the solstice day. I think that's what's on the album too. He says the shortest day, and you can hear them sort of not line up.
Because I think shortest day is in the second half of the song. Isn't that what he says?
I think
in the
you're
second
right.
half is shortest day? Yeah.
I watch the sun disappear on the shortest day.
Maybe he was a little nervous. Maybe he was a little drunk. Maybe he was just thinking of the second verse, but it always makes me chuckle. This is a song that's also on the live album version. This is really true for all three of the tracks that are pulled over from the live album version. They sound looser. Listening to them side by side, they're really pretty similar, but this just sounds like a band that's played together more. There's a little bit more improv at points, and I would just say that it's a more cohesive version of what they've done before.
It's really amazing.
The very last track on Live at a Festival is one of Matt's old standbys to play live, The Pheasant. I think, Jesse, the track you love, Tara, the track that you don't love. What's our take on this version of The Pheasant?
This version, it gave me chills. I was just listening to it, my eyes closed, and no, I loved it.
It's funny. I really, really, really love the Pheasant. I love it on the live album. I love it on the regular album. Not a fan of this version. To me, It's like they really dialed up the rock part of it. They made it seems a little heavier all the way through. I feel like the original has a lot more highs and lows. It's a little bit more subtle, the live album version and the album version. It's not bad. It's just, to me, it's not as nuanced and tight as the version from the live album. But you said too, it's a little looser, and I agree with that.
Okay.
But it's a festival performance.
Right.
And I find it interesting, and I think it was done with a lot of thought, that these 5 tracks were all from the festivals he played around that time, right? There's so many live tracks to pull from, but they chose to narrow them down to these 3 performances. And I love music festivals. Austin, where I live, has quite a few big music festivals that come through each year, and I always make it to at least 1 or 2 of them. And it's just such a unique experience. Playing at a festival is not like playing anywhere else. The audience is bought in, everyone's having fun. You can imagine everyone's hot and uncomfortable and maybe a little shit-faced, but just ready to like kind of let loose. And it's just such a communal experience. And you hear that as tight as these songs are, they in some unquantifiable way, just feel more fun than I think a lot of the songs on the live album. And yeah, I think they just wanted to spotlight that side of the Maypoles that we don't always hear.
Yeah, I'm really glad that they did this little, it feels like a little bonus actually, this little bonus disc, but I'm really glad that they did it because I think that unquantifiable part is the sense of space. Music sounds better sometimes in a big outdoor space. Like it just soars. And you can hear that in the recording. You can't put your finger on it, but you can hear it and you can tell that it was recorded outdoors. And I think that adds a whole different depth to the recording.
It's expansive.
Expansive. Exactly. All right. So, guys, we did it. We have conquered the first 10 years with acid jazz and beyond.
Plus some bonus years.
Some bonus years, exactly. Do we have any closing thoughts of Gather Up?
I think it's so wide-ranging that there aren't a whole lot of overarching conclusions you can draw. Besides, Matt is an incredibly versatile musician and someone who's very thoughtful about the final product and very generous in letting us peek behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, too, if you do not own this box set, if you can, seek it out and buy it. It's definitely worth it. It's fantastic. All right, well, that's it. Thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you so much again to Ben Meadows for answering some questions for us that we really wanted to know the answers to. And as always, you can follow us on pretty much every social media platform. We're at Obsessed Obscure. Come join us on Discord. We have some good conversations there. And that's it for now. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
You and me and the BBC.